American Giant makes great clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, and more right here in the U.S. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Former from Evo, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family of Podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. Join me in segment number 2, the one and only Rob Donaldson. He does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets Show, and he's going to be joining me talking about some of the futures that he's got on some of these conference tournaments, how he's playing these conference tournaments in general. We're going to be looking forward to a few games for Wednesday. Now, when we recorded this, there weren't a lot of lines up on these games because the way the conference tournaments are right now, you just don't have a line until a matchup is set, so that does cause for quite a bit of hoopla, but a great chat with Rob is coming up in segment number 2, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any of those Twitter/X questions today, but had a fun day of college basketball on Tuesday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
The Summit League is going to be going way of South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits, they get the win, but they don't get the cover as South Dakota State did not make a single field goal in the final 6+ minutes of this one. They were up 21 points with 6 minutes remaining, and Denver from there makes a bonsai charge to get you to the window if you took the +9, +10 or so that this goes at 76-68. By the way, Denver was one of the top over teams in all of college basketball. 19 overs, 10 unders, and a push is how they finish off the season. But for Denver, Jackson Brenchley was able to supply the team with 20 points, and South Dakota State, even though they went cold towards the end of the game, 19 of 23 from three-point range. They only turned the ball over 9 times. They win that rebound battle 42-38 with William Kyle III chipping in there 15 points, 11 boards, so they secure their bid to the NCAA tournament. Also, Wagner was able to do so in a low-scoring slog that took college basketball back to the dark ages. 54-47 the final in this one. For Wagner, they did this with just 7 healthy players. They went 2 of 15 from three-point range, 8 of 14 at the free throw line, and Merrimack, they won the turnover battle 12-9, but they won the battle on the glass. Wagner, they were able to get 12 rebounds out of Keontae Lewis. They win the rebound battle overall 42-27, and that was the difference as Merrimack went 10 of 38 from three-point range. Just a very ugly eyesore of a game. This has been a thing of beauty, though. If you've been betting Stony Brook, hopefully we get them in one of these ancillary tournaments. 25-8-1 against the spread for them. Charleston is able to get the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament via the CAA championship. They win the game 82-79 in overtime, but Stony Brook gets the cash as Charleston, they go 13 of 30 from 3, and Stony Brook went 15 out of 35 from distance. Tyler Stevenson Moore, he gave you more with 26 points, and for Charleston, very deep team. They had Rain Smith reined it in with 23 points. Each of their top 5 starters, they were all able to give you at least 7 points per contest, so they were able to supply there. But Charleston, they're on to the NCAA tournament, and this team was on to another cover as McNeese is 1 win away from the NCAA tournament. They were able to take down Lamar by a count of 76-57, and it's a McNeese team that's been pretty solid against the spread. They are 16-12 ATS as for McNeese. They go just 3 of 13 from three-point range, but they held Lamar to shooting 17 of 47 from the floor for McNeese. They did a nice job winning that turnover battle 17-6 as well, so they are going to be battling it out for the Southland Championship, and they're going to be facing off against Nichols. As Nichols, they were able to take down Texas A&M Corpus Christi 81-73 in overtime, and for this Nichols bunch, they are now 19-11 against the spread against a Corpus Christi team that they are, as of right now, 19-8-1 against the spread. We shall see if they get into an ancillary tournament. But for Nichols, they win this game despite turning the ball over 20 times thanks to a nice 22-point performance out of Deontay Smith. So lots of fun out there. And then out there in the Horizon League tournament, it is going to be Oakland who's going to be heading to the NCAA tournament. They take down UW-Milwaukee. This by a count of 83-76 as for this Oakland bunch, they enter 21-13 against the spread. And for Oakland, their three-point shooting defense has not been great all season, but they hold UW-Milwaukee to shoot just 4 of 19 from distance in this one. And Jack Golke off the bench goes 5 of 12 from three-point range. But how about Trey Townsend? 38 points, 11 rebounds. That propels this Oakland team to victory. And then if you're looking more at the lesser teams that took the floor, these are the opening rounds of so many of these conference tournaments like the Big 12, the ACC, what have you out there in the Big 12. Central Florida has been a bit all over the place this year, but now they're 19-12 against the spread. They take down Oklahoma State by kind of 77-62, a 20-loss season for Mike Boynton. Not great to say the least, and for Central Florida, they went 9 of 18 from three-point range. You had Ibrahima Diallo be able to chip in their 17 points, 11 rebounds, and I have to wonder where Oklahoma State is going to be going moving forward in this one. If you took the opener over in this Fordham versus Davidson game, you just barely got there at about a 133.5, but closing number was more around 135.5. You survived overtime if you took the under. 71-63 the final as Davidson's season is done, and Davidson scores just 2 points in overtime, and they turn the ball over 20 times. Oy vey. Connor Kuchera was able to chip in their 24 points for Davidson, and for Fordham, most of their scoring came off the bench. As a matter of fact, they got, I believe, 42 points off the bench with Will Richardson being able to supply 20 points, so that was of intrigue. You've been able to have a nice money-making team in Notre Dame who's been playing north of 62% of their games to the under, but this one was quite a bit overwhelming. Notre Dame, they take down our good friends Georgia Tech 84-80 the final. This was an uncharacteristically high-scoring game for Notre Dame, which they went 12 of 23 from 3. Brendan Shrewsbury trips in their 23 points. He goes 5 of 8 from 3. Notre Dame does lose that turnover battle 14-7, but they also win the rebound battle 31-23, so they're on to the next round of the ACC tournament, along with NC State, who was able to get a 95-85 win over Louisville. Louisville ends the year 13-18-1 against the spread, and it sounds as though Kenny Payne is going to get canned. Can't say that I necessarily blame Louisville, and Louisville, they lose this game despite the fact that they go 10 of 18 from 3 as Sky Clark went 7 of 9 from 3 for 36 points, and it still wasn't enough because his defense was ghastly. NC State had Casey Marcel go 13 of 13 at the free throw line for 25 points. NC State wins the rebound battle 27-26 and the turnover battle 16-9. So Louisville, their season is done. Vermont just continues to cash unders for you. They take down New Hampshire 66-59 as for Vermont, they have now played 22 unders and 9 overs thus far this season. That is the 4th highest percentage of games to go under in all of college basketball. And for New Hampshire, they do get the cover here. They were a 15.5 point underdog as they went 4 of 28 from three-point range, but Vermont went just 7 of 26 from 3. Vermont kept a little bit of a cleaner sheet. 10 turnovers for them, 15 for this New Hampshire unit, but New Hampshire, they're able to get that cover, and they've been a relatively good money-making team all season long. And then in the St. Louis versus Rhode Island game, two teams that have not wanted to play defense all season long, they played a rare under as St. Louis has played 58% of their games to the over. Both of these teams, 18 overs to 13 unders, but St. Louis this season, it continues. They take down Rhode Island by a count of 74-71 as for Rhode Island, 6 of 19 from three-point range, but they really costed themselves going 15 of 24 at the free throw line. They lost the turnover battle, they lost the rebound battle, so St. Louis, they survive. They're able to advance. Hopefully our DK Network Garita picks can be able to get back online. I apologize about how bad these have been the last few days. Trust me, I am still putting in the work. I am going to rest at nothing to get these back online. I had Iona laying the points, and Iona just decided to not be able to close this one out. 60-57, Iona gets a win but no cover. They just weren't able to get in that zone of covering. They were up like 5 to 7 points quite a bit late, and then they just couldn't really execute late. They won the turnover battle 12-7. They were able to do a nice job on the glass, grabbing 12 offensive rebounds to Manhattan 6, but Manhattan goes 5 of 13 from 3. Iona 10 of 27 from distance, and Iona 8 of 14 at the free throw line. That was a little bit unsightly. Eden Trout, he was able to bail the team out with 24 points, and for Manhattan, they were able to get 3 guys into double figures. So I will look to do better on Wednesday. Again, apologize. This has been a really bad showing by myself, and this was not a good showing from Niagara. They entered into this game 13-3 against the spread in a road or neutral court environment. They very nearly lose to a Siena team that has been all sorts of ghastly this season. 67-65 for Siena. They're able to hang in there. They don't get the job done, but Michael Ely off the bench was able to supply the team with 15 points. Zach Tekken, he was able to chip in there 11 points in his first action in quite some time, and Sean Gordon tried to give it a go, was only able to go 5 minutes, and for Niagara, they go just 7-23 from 3. That has been their bread and butter. They've been shooting 40+% from 3-point range away from them. They just weren't able to get it going in this one, but Montana State, they really do have it going right now. 74-71, they do take down Sacramento State. No cover for them, but all of a sudden Montana State has been able to get very hot with their offense as they in this game shoot 11 of 27 from 3-point range. I have no idea how they've gotten so hot with their shooting, but they sure have. And a team that went cold towards the back half of the season, how about Miami? They end the season on an 8-game losing streak. They fall to Boston College for the third time in a month and a half. 81-65 the final for Miami. They are only 14-16-2 against the spread, which I find to be incredible with how badly they played as far as the season. I thought that against the spread record would be much worse, but they go 7-29 from 3, 27 of 71 from the floor. They have plenty of opportunities, just couldn't bang it through, and they win the turnover battle 11-6, but they lose a rebound battle 43-36 as Quinton Post, 30 points, 13 rebounds in the post. And then you also did see a nice win and cover on this Tuesday from UMass Lowell. They closed in a lot of places at us about a 6.5 point favorite. And I know that ESPN initially had this as a 76-70 win, so make sure that this got scored accordingly as a 77-77 point win. You might be the difference between cashing a ticket and not, but Bryant, they go just 5 of 23 from 3-point range. This UMass Lowell team and Yuri Covington be able to supply a double-double. 17 points, 10 rebounds, and for the UMass Lowell team. Now against the spread thus far this season, it's been a little bit up and down for them. They're now 12-15-1 against the spread, but it does feel like they're starting to get into good form. They're going to be in the AAC final, and if you're looking at the Big 12 as well, West Virginia season, that has come to an end. Cincinnati, no cover, but they win by kind of 90-85, and for West Virginia, man, this was just a really, really tough season for them in general, a situation I don't think any coach would ever want to find themselves in, and if you were taking a look at West Virginia overs, 17 overs, 14 unders, and a push for them thus far this season. And if you're looking at the trends that we're seeing in college basketball right now, 51% of games overall this season have went over the total, 2,745 overs to 2,636 unders, with favorites overall for the season hitting at 50.5%. And if you're looking at the last 7 days in college basketball, favorites, they've seen a downturn. 134, 146, and 1 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you're looking at overs, they're not doing too bad. They're hitting at a 49.1% clip. Typically this time of year, they're honestly doing worse. 136 overs to 141 under. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Tuesday. Now let's turn it forward to Wednesday and what Rob Donaldson is all taking a look at in the futures market for these conference tournaments. We're going to be chatting about that next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man as Rob Donaldson. He does a tremendous job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's doing great work over at Underdog Fantasy, his YouTube feed at youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. He's always got a bunch of great shows breaking down all of his picks and so much more. To be able to follow Rob on Twitter/X, that is at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, always a pleasure hopping on, Greg. And, the conference tournament season is flying by already. I mean, we just saw the Sun Belt wrap up, and it's still just been kind of a fun ride, and even some heartbreakers when you have a team like Northern Kentucky who ends up getting the draw, getting past that first round, and you're sitting on plus 2,500. And on the other side, you have plus 2,500 with Cleveland State. You start dreaming. You start having delusions of grandeur with some of these futures, but it's a fun ride regardless.
Yep, it is certainly a ride. I don't know if it's fun when they don't hit, but It certainly is a ride, to say the least. And I mean, just how do you gauge championship week this week? Because I know that you've got a few futures out. I know you're taking a look at quite a few games just from a game-to-game standpoint as well. How do you just go about this week with regards to your bets? And is it a little bit different than what you do throughout the season?
There are some conferences that I like to have a lot of future stake in, and then there's some conferences that I want absolutely no future stake, because the teams that maybe I like, I'm probably going to like on an individual basis, and the value really isn't there from the long shot perspective with a future bet. And it really just kind of depends. Sometimes I like going for the long range, long shot futures with a team like, Texas or St. Joseph's, Ohio State, even in the Big Ten. And other times, I kind of like looking at, these future bets as just kind of parlaying a win streak together. And that's kind of where I land with teams like Iowa State and Illinois. So it's definitely an interesting time of year because you can mix up so much variety. It's hard not to kind of get caught up, and especially when the day games are going to start, just kind of betting a ton on every single slate. But there's a lot of value to be had out there for sure.
Oh, there certainly is a lot of value to be had. And just in terms of the futures board itself, are there a few conference tournaments that you are taking a look at from a little bit more of a future standpoint, since we are right now not having a lot of games up with regards to the spreads for Wednesday, and that's a part of this week as well. We're going to have a lot of games involving these back-to-backs where you're not going to be knowing the spread until like you wake up in the AM and everything like that. So that's part of the fun, and that's part of the, shall we say, challenge of being able to handicap this week. But are there any futures that you're liking for this week?
Yeah, you look at the Mountain West, and I think that's a league that's completely wide open with Nevada, kind of spearheading the entire league. But they've been a team that has kind of fallen flat this time of year in years past. And, you kind of have to wonder, even just from a depth standpoint, whether or not they can withstand, just an onslaught that's going to be coming at them, especially when the bracket is like one of the traditional brackets where it's not just kind of putting the 1 and 2 seeds at a major advantage. It's kind of more so neutral where they get the buys, but then they're going to be right back in the mix. And when I'm looking at that division, or that conference rather, I'm staring at UNLV and Colorado State. I got plus 850 on UNLV and then plus 750 on Colorado State. You want to look at guard play. You want to look at teams that are playing their best ball. Colorado State might not fit that bill on the latter part, but I mean, Isaiah Stevens is a guy you want to back in March. And with UNLV, this is their home floor. Yes, I do think that's kind of getting a little bit overblown, but what's not getting overblown is that they're playing their best basketball of the season right now, and it couldn't be at a better time.
Yep, I do think that taking a look at teams that get hot is something that is very wise to do this time of year. So Rob Donaldson, he does absolutely amazing work over at Underdog Fantasy and so much more, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And just how do you gauge the recent form with some of these teams versus the overall season metrics? Because I do think that is one of the most difficult things to do, because I do think that taking a look at last 10 games, like a team I wouldn't want to touch with a 20-foot pole right now is the Wisconsin Badgers, who their recent form is absolutely terrible. Like, that's a team that I want absolutely no part of, but I mean, a team that might be a little bit more up and down, like I think Kentucky is perhaps a good example. They've had their wins, they've had their losses. How do you gauge teams like that? Because I do think that it is very interesting to try to find that balance of perhaps a team that's been very good all season long versus a team that has gotten hot.
It's more important just kind of playing your best basketball right now, because if you've kind of fallen flat in recent times, but you're still sporting a glossy record, you can get picked off, like a team like Appalachian State we just saw in the Sun Belt, where they got tested by Georgia Southern, and then the next night they end up losing a tight one at the buzzer. And so there's just teams that have been rolling all season long, but if you start to see them stumble, I would be hesitant to back that team, and I would also kind of look to fade them, because you're getting a lot of inherent value just from a win-loss standpoint and a seeding standpoint. A lot of people like to get enamored with those numbers. Yep,
a lot of people do, and I always think that there is something to just taking a look at what a team has done outside the conference as well, because I just still remember the Patriot League tournament. You saw Lafayette go like completely winless outside the conference against D1 competition. They played well in conference, and then lo and behold, when it came to the conference tournament, they fell back to earth a little bit as well. So trying to strike that balance, I think, is difficult, but something that is a must this time of year. And I was mentioning this a little bit before. As we're recording this, we just don't have numbers up on these games, because a lot of these games are involving back-to-backs. A lot of these games, you've got to be determined versus to be determined. And just how do you go about trying to extract the best of the number? Because I personally do think that this week with Championship Week, it's one of the best weeks for being able to find closing line value. Not that that means that you're going to win every single bet, but I just have noticed that a lot of these openers that you're going to see posted up on these games when a matchup is set, if you like it, you probably want to take it right away because it's probably going to move.
Right, 100%. If you are on the back end of that line movement, you might just want to lay off the game. And, sometimes that's going to work against you. Towson opened up at plus 4.5, and this was against Charleston in the semifinals, and it closed at 6.5. Well, what does the game finish at? Is a 5-point game. So it's nice to be on the right side of that closing line value, but at the same time, I think there's just enough variance and enough movement this time of year where taking the early stabs, if you're kind of dialed in terms of how you think lines are going to move, you can get out in front of a lot of numbers and maybe even shave off entire possessions just by being early to the table.
Yep, I do think that is so important to do, and we have been seeing it all throughout the week. You have a total of 146 or something like that. I believe that we saw that in the Horizon League tournament in that Oakland game in the semifinal where it was opening up at a 146.5, closed at a 142.5, and lo and behold, it lands 145. So I do think that when it comes to all of this, it's just all about finding a good number, while the handicapping, looking at the injury situation and something like that, it is all so important. At the same time, if you're getting the worst of the number, it might be all for naught, as I do think that is just something to prioritize. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does tremendous work on his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, right here on right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do think that we've got ourselves a lot of great conference tournaments to take a look at, and a lot of them are going to be starting up on Wednesday. We saw a few on Tuesday with, let's call it what it is, some of the poopier matchups out there in the ACC, some of the dregs they were finding in the Atlantic 10 and everything like that. And we do have a few set matchups like TCU versus Oklahoma is one of intrigue. The Big Ten tournament is going to get started. The Mountain West tournament is going to get started. Even though we don't have a lot of openers that are up right now, are there a few games that you're taking a look at and you might have a little bit of an angle on them?
Yeah, you're taking a look at Ohio State going up against Iowa, and that's a game that could lead to a lot of fireworks. But at the same time, Iowa, in historic fashion over the past 6-7 years, has not performed well in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, they won it that one year when they had Keegan Murray and Jordan Bohannon. But at the same time, when you look at kind of their past resumes, there's a lot of first game exits and a lot of upsets where they're on the butt end of it. And Ohio State is playing the best ball in the Big Ten right now, arguably. When you're kind of looking at them, maybe Illinois is in that mix. Obviously, Purdue's in that mix, but Ohio State even beat Purdue in the same kind of game span. And they've just went on the road and destroyed Rutgers, which at the rack is always going to be a feat, especially when you're doing it by 20 points. So Ohio State's a team that I really do think could potentially make a run and pull a second round upset over Illinois. I think it starts there with Iowa.
Yeah, but I do think that the Big Ten is so intriguing because this is one of those conferences where I think recent form matters so much because you've got your clear top two teams. You've got Illinois as that clear number 2. You've got Purdue as that clear number 1, but I'm not sure how you gauge things, but Nebraska is the number 3 seed. I was mentioning Wisconsin, and they were so good to begin the season. Then they went straight down the toilet bowl. Minnesota has been a team of fascination because they've been able to cover so many numbers, but let's call it what it is, not necessarily playing the world's best basketball right now. How much is this sort of that tournament that you want to be looking at recent form? Because I go back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier, and this just feels like a textbook example.
Yeah, 100%. You look for the opportunities in tournaments like this where maybe it's not the entire field of play that feels really open because obviously Purdue and Illinois are spearheading it. But when you're kind of splitting this bracket in half because there is no reseeding like a lot of these other conference tournaments, and I look at that bottom half of the bracket, Illinois and Nebraska are the teams that are spearheading that bottom side. And then it's Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana, Michigan, Penn State. I mean, that's a lot of conglomeration of teams down there. And even the top half, those Nebraska and Illinois games, are winnable for anybody on a neutral floor. So if you want to take a long shot, pick maybe 2 teams out of that bottom side that aren't Illinois and Nebraska. And I think one of them is going to be potentially playing in the Big Ten championship game here.
Yep, and let's just hope that because I had this pop up on my feed just before we started this chat, that we don't have a replay of the old 2011 Penn State versus Wisconsin game. You may recall that was a game that landed 36-33. So, yeah, that was one of the saddest things I've ever seen in my life. And sometimes that just happen. And how much do you take a look at some of those historical trends when it comes to conference tournaments? Like, we just got through the biggest one for me with these Arch Madness, Missouri Valley Conference total unders, just because I have no idea what it is about the Enterprise Center, but it just seems to always lend itself to unders. I was just talking about the Big Ten tournament, that 36-33 game, and while we haven't seen anything too extreme like that, the Big Ten tournament always seems to go under as well. How much do you take a look at that this time of year?
There are certain things when it's a hockey facility like the Enterprise Center in St. Louis being used as the foundation or the floor in these conference tournaments that leads to a lot of just sloppy play. I don't know if there's anything to that. That might just be me with my tinfoil hat on, but I've seen it time and time again where a lot of these hockey rink transformations really just kind of look like bad basketball being played out there. So maybe there's something to that, maybe there's something not, but in terms of just kind of historical trends in the tournament, I think it absolutely matters when you're talking about styles of play and talking about coaches that have had longevity of kind of fading in this time of year. And, I look at a team like Brad Brownell and Clemson, where they're right in the middle. They're potentially just kind of past the bubble at this point because they've played well in recent weeks, but this is a time of year where they've kind of fallen flat. And then I also look at a team like Texas A&M with Buzz Williams, who for some reason every single year in the SEC tournament makes a run. And right now they're just kind of getting looked down upon because they've been playing some awful basketball leading into this. But hey, historical trends matter, and Buzz Williams didn't get paid the way he's getting paid because he's not a good coach. And that can be a flip of the switch at any single point in time given a season. Oh man, we do have some big time intrigue in the SEC tournament. We're going to be talking about this with Blake Lovell on the podcast tomorrow. That Ole Miss versus Texas A&M game is going to be a slobber knocker. That LSU versus Mississippi State game as well. And I think that leads into a very good point. You've got a Texas A&M team that is firmly on the bubble. For Ole Miss, I feel like they need to win a few games to be able to make the NCAA tournament. How do you take a look at those bubble teams this time of year? Because I've always had a theory, and this goes well beyond college basketball. This is for Major League Baseball, the NFL, just any sort of playoff scenario where it's like win to get in, you have to win 2 to get in, something like that. And my theory is if you're in a must win, you must not be very good. I'm not sure if you sort of take that same approach or not, but it really is no factor in my handicap as to whether or not a team is in sort of like a must-win spot to be able to make the NCAA tournament. Yeah, and sometimes it's taken out of their hands if you're right in that first 4 in bubble where there's going to be bid stealers, maybe 2 or 3. And on a given year where there's 3, you're really kind of feeling awful if you're just kind of one of those lingering teams on the bubble because you feel like your time has come. I think that's the case, and we're starting to get into these high major basketball conference tournaments now. This is where the bid steals happen. They don't happen at the mid-major and low-major level. This is where we see it. And so just kind of thinking about that in mind, definitely have some variance with your conference champions, and just know that if you're a team on the bubble, you might be on the bubble and might be in the first 4 in, but you might have to win the entire thing in terms of your conference to actually get in if there's some bid steals along the way. Yep, and how fitting would it be if we see like Syracuse going to Dayton, because it would harken back to what we've seen from them time and time again. Jim Boeheim is gone, but they're keeping that tradition rich as we got Rob Donaldson, who does great work over at Underdog Fantasy, along with the Rob's Best Bet Show. Joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do want to bring up one other thing with you as well, because with the Wednesday card, we're going to be seeing quite a few games that are going to involve bigger spreads. Like we've got the Michigan versus Penn State game, and Michigan has been all sorts of almighty awful this season. You've got DePaul playing against Villanova, and good grief, this DePaul team has been just so sad. The entire Pac-12 has been awful as well. But how do you gauge these conference tournament games in which we do have larger spreads? Because this time of year, things do get very, very tight. And I just always have a little bit of a tough time laying bigger numbers, but especially this time of year, I do find that it's very difficult to be laying double figures with darn near any team, even a team like New Mexico going up against Air Force. You make a great point, and I think what kind of speaks to that a little bit more is the teams that are laying double-digit points are the teams that are going to have the most pressure on them this time of year, because when you're talking about a neutral floor, potentially, if it is one of those conference tournaments that utilizes neutral floors, then all the pressure is on one side and the other team can just kind of play loose. We saw it with Georgia Southern going up against App State and taking them to the wire. And then obviously App State got picked off just entirely as well. And even, you kind of go to the Chattanooga ETSU upset there too in the SoCon. It's the teams that are playing with pressure, laying double digit points, that are at the most kind of upsettable spots, because you don't think that these players who are in college kind of know where the line's sitting and how much of a favorite they are. Maybe they don't know the exact line, but they kind of have a gauge on, where the opinions are on how they should play. And when you're in that spotlight and everything's riding on this or you're done, it can mean a lot. And this is where we see a lot of teams just kind of flop and fall apart.
Yeah, we certainly do. And man, this is just such a crazy time of year. We get wall-to-wall action all throughout the week this week. And then next week, it's the NCAA tournament. And then the week after, for those of us that love afternoon games, the baseball season starts up once again as well. So we've got a lot of fun. And Rob, I know that you do a great job of covering it all. So let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, Greg. And as always, I really appreciate having me on. And for those who are wanting to kind of follow my bets and also follow me into the Major League Baseball season as well as March Madness here, you can do so just at my Twitter, RobDFB. And also on YouTube, just my name, Rob Donaldson, are just going to be the best ways to find me. And as always, Greg, really appreciate having me on. I
appreciate you, Rob. Rob does such a good job gauging this game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, always lends such good insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to get our good friend Rob Donaldson aboard. He does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets Show. Taking a look at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love. Doing a great job on the futures front, the game-to-game front, and just deciphering this great game of basketball that we all know and love. A big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_D1, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is essentially tip time with regards to these conference tournaments, like the Atlantic 10 is first up since they have their first game at 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, and then the ACC tips off after that. The Big 12 follows suit, so on and so forth. The games are at the bottom are the SWAC, the Southland, the MEAC, and the Patriot League, since those are a part of smaller conferences. Everything else, that is in time order with regards to tip time of these conference tournaments. So let's dive in, starting with the Atlantic 10 at 637, 638. It is St. Joe's, and they're playing against George Mason. This is from the Barclays Center out there in New York. George Mason is a pick'em to a 1-point favorite. Your total on this game is 137. I did make George Mason a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on this rather pick'em line, and the big reason why I do like George Mason in this spot is just the way that they're able to defend down low. With St. Joe's going into the latter part of the month of January, this was a top 100 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They were doing a really nice job being able to lock teams down, being able to give you a good effort there, and that went straight down the toilet bowl, really starting in late January, early February. It is a St. Joe's team that has some nice firepower in terms of their offense, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. St. Joe's 79th in all of college basketball. Doesn't take too much of a fall off when they're away from home, but now you have to go up against a George Mason team that, even though they will give it up from three-point range, George Mason outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they are really good on the interior. 11th in the country in opponents' two-point shooting percentage, top 45 team in terms of rebound rate as well, with Keyshawn Hall supplying you with 17 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. You've been able to have some nice three-point shooting for this bunch as well. Amari 3000 Kelly, 12 points, 6 boards, chips in there a block, shoots 43.5% from three-point. You got a 41% three-point shooter in Darius Maddox, who does a good job. The fear that you do have for George Mason is that they are a team that ranks in the bottom 50 in terms of total possessions per game, yet they do turn the ball over 12 times per contest. St. Joe's, they turn the ball over less while being more of a mid-tempo / very, very slightly up-tempo team, with Eric Reynolds being their top scorer, 17 points, 2.5 assists. He's been able to pop it from three at about a 39% clip. You've got a pair of guys in Lynn Greer, Xavier Brown. They've done a nice job with about 7 assists, 25.5 points per contest out of them as well. And then you've got a little bit more down low with Grace Adesonko coming back to the fold. He has been dealing with injury and has been limited since coming back, but you get back a true 7-footer that's able to pop some threes, so that's big for this St. Joe's team. But that said, with St. Joe's, they have really been giving it up from three-point range themselves. I was alluding to it, the fact that you do have a George Mason team that is really the big kryptonite that they do have in terms of their defense, but for St. Joe's, in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, it was very good in non-conference play. Here in conference, this went straight down the toilet bowl away from home. Opponents are shooting 36.2% from three, and I think that George Mason, with their plethora of outside options, going to be able to get it done, even though I do think that this is going to be a lower tempo game. I do think that you're going to get some late game fouling in just enough for the total to go over. Semi-total 138.5. Looking at the over, and with George Mason, willing to lay up to 2 with them. 639, 640 on the betting board. This is VCU and Fordham doing battle from Barclays Center, and VCU is a favorite of 7.5 points. Your total on this game, it is 133 to 134, and I did set my total 134.5. I'm going to be looking at the over. Fordham is not an efficient offense at all. We saw that on display yesterday, but this is a Fordham unit that they do play up-tempo. They're a top 60 team in terms of total possessions per game, and they do go up against a VCU team that is very solid in terms of their defense, but it's a lot more their perimeter defense rather than their low-post defense. For VCU, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they're checking in 39th in all of college basketball away from home. Opponents are shooting just 30.9% from distance against them, but if you take a look at them down low, even though they are a top 75 team, in terms of rebound rate, Toby Lowell has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, and then you've got a lot of guys that sort of contribute like 4 to 5 rebounds per game. They are more around about 45th in the country in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and for Fordham, they're actually giving up fewer points per possession away from home rather than at home. And for Fordham, they do a nice job of being able to guard inside the arc. They're a top 100 team in terms of road opponent two-point shooting percentage. This is a VCU unit that has been dealing with injuries all season long. Sean Barisal has been banged up. Joe Besmealy was not eligible to begin the season, but these are two guys that will be able to give you double figures. It's been able to transform this VCU offense, and then that helps out Max Shulga, who's been Mr. Do-It-All. 15 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 42% from three-point range. You've got pretty much out of your top 6 scorers, 4 of them being able to shoot at least 39.5% from three-point range, and that's going to be a little bit of a tough ask for a Fordham team that, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they have been a little bit lackluster with that regard. It's a Fordham team that has actually been able to guard the arc once again. A little bit better away from home rather than at home, but this Fordham team, 306th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It was 39% at home, 32.2% away from home, which I do think bodes a little bit better for them. But I still think that when you take a look at that split, probably a little bit of good luck on the road, a little bit of bad luck at home. I think that irons out, and I do think that VCU going to be able to run away with this game with Seb Jackson back in the fold, being able to give you 3.5 assists per game, and you just don't have that facilitation when it comes to Fordham. And you got a team that is well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Kyle Rose, Yusuf Metter, they've been able to combine for 20.5 points per contest. Rose is able to shoot 39.5% from 3, but as a whole, Fordham, they turn the ball over 13 times per contest, shoot 66% of the free throw line, and 31.5% from 3, with them going up against a VCU team that has given up the ball a little bit more, but they do a nice job of being able to find good shots. I do think that you have just enough here for and over. It's a VCU unit that has been giving it up a little bit more recently, giving up at least 69 points so far in their last 5 games, so semi-total 134.5 looking over, and with VCU, 1 to lay up to 8 with them, made them an 8.5 point favorite, 641, 642 on the betting board. LaSalle is going to be playing against St. Bonaventure. Bonnies are a 6 to a 6.5 point favorite. Total is 143. A semi-total at a 136. I'm going to be diving in on the under. Now, St. Bonaventure, not necessarily in the world's greatest form with their defense coming into this tournament, but this is still one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. 311th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. It's a LaSalle team that they crank up the tempo a little bit, but it is not as if they're playing at warp speed. About 173rd in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Now, what LaSalle does is they maximize their possessions. They only turn the ball over about 10 times per contest. You've got a pair of guys in the backcourt that do a nice job of being able to run good, efficient offense. Khalil Brantley has been your main three-point shooter, shooting 39% from distance. He's able to give you north of 13 points per contest, as he and Jamari Brickus have been able to combine for 9 assists per contest, with Brickus 13.5 points per contest. He's actually the main three-point shooter at 39%. Brantley shoots more around 32% from the outside, but Brantley's more of your rebounder with about 5 rebounds per contest, and that's a big thing for LaSalle. They're about 300th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. You've been able to have Deshaun Shepard, coupled with Rokas Josias, be able to combine for 11 rebounds per game, but just don't have a lot down low. Anwar Gill has been a nice little mixer and shaker for this team, but he's been dealing with a few injuries as well. He's been a little bit touch and go here down the stretch, and got a St. Bonaventure team that is one of the most veteran-laden teams in all of college basketball. You've got Charles Pride, along with Moses Flowers, Darrell Banks III. These guys have just been through it as players. These three guys combined for about 30 points per contest. All three of these guys combined to shoot about 38.5% from three-point range, and they do a nice job protecting the ball themselves, only about 10.8 turnovers per game. It is a St. Bonaventure unit that should be able to do a nice job of being able to cut this team off from the outside the Bonnies. They allow opponents away from home to shoot just 32.3% from three-point range. Now for LaSalle, they are well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are 276th in opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but that goes down to 33.6% away from home. That's more like 37% when they are at home. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring slog, and I do think that St. Bonaventure, who is outside the top 100 with regards to rebound rate, but inside the top 150, they should be able to own the glass. Got Chad Venning giving you about 5 boards. Charles Pride, he's a nice athlete sufferer, gives you 5.5 rebounds. Isam Isavilis, it's the man better known as Jan Farrell, is able to give you 5 rebounds per game. I haven't been able to get that name right all season long, but that said, I take a look at this St. Bonaventure team. I do think that they should be able to lay it on a LaSalle unit that, they do a nice job of being able to protect the ball, but past that, they do have quite a few warts. It's a LaSalle unit that has been playing better on defense as well, to their credit, in terms of their last 6 games. This is a bunch at LaSalle giving up 66 points or fewer in all but one of them. Last time these two teams faced off, St. Bonaventure took a loss, 72-59, though. In that game, you saw LaSalle go 10 of 24 from three-point range, and I do think that that's going to be winding down a little bit. I think that St. Bonaventure gets a revenge here, set my line at 8, so going to be willing to lay up to 7.5, and I did set my total 136, also looking at the under. 643, 644 on the betting board. Duquesne and St. Louis do battle from Barclays Center. This is a game without numbers. I am literally doing this as St. Louis just was able to take down Rhode Island to be able to survive and advance to this round of the tournament. But I've got my handicap. 5 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay with Duquesne. 6 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with St. Louis. And then 147 or less, I'm going to be looking at the over. 148 or higher, I'm going to be taking a look at the under. Have to wonder how much St. Louis is going to be wanting to run with this being a back-to-back. And it is a St. Louis team that has been all sorts of ghastly in terms of their defense. Prior to yesterday, this team had given up at least 80 points in every one of their games since February 7th, other than one game against St. Bonaventure. So, all but one of their games since February 7th. It has been really rough. They're outside the top 340 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're a team that they're able to bomb it from three-point range. Entering into yesterday, this group was shooting about 37% from three-point range. You did see them put the clamps down on Rhode Island, but I will say this, it's a Rhode Island team that was struggling all season long, but it does feel like St. Louis is playing a little bit of better basketball right now. They rank at the top 155 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and that's really the kryptonite that you do have with the Duquesne unit. Duquesne has been able to climb into the top 85 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you really have 2 guys that are able to put the ball in the basket for Duquesne. You've got Jimmy Clark along with Day Grant. These 2 guys have been able to give you about 32 points per contest. They combine to be able to give you about 6 assists, 2.5 steals out of Clark, and Clark is able to shoot about 33.5% from three-point range. Aside that, you don't have anyone else that gives you north of 7.2 points per contest. You've got rebounders that will give you combined 10 boards in the case of Fusani Drame and David Dixon between the 2 of them. I mean, they've been able to do a good job swarming on the glass. Dixon is able to give you 1.7 blocks per game, so he's been able to step up in a little bit of a way. Kareem Rozier, he's able to shoot 40% from 3, chips in there, 2.5 assists per contest, but last time he scored more than 6 points in a game, you have to go all the way back to February 3rd on him as well. So it's a Duquesne team that's looking to bog things down, play a slow, grimy style. These 2 teams actually did play on the 20th of February, and in that game, Duquesne was able to win 81-66 in that game. They shot 9 of 26 from three-point range with Day Grant chipping in there 31, Jimmy Clark 19. The rest of the team didn't really do a whole heck of a lot, and I expect that to be the same year. The question becomes, can St. Louis play relatively even up on the glass, with Terrence Hargrove giving you 5.5 rebounds per game, Bradley Eziwairo being able to chip in there 6 boards, 12.5 points per game, and having Mr. Sincere Parker back in the fold has been able to make a big difference as well. He only played 15 minutes in that game. He was just coming back from injury, and he, in the game against Rhode Island yesterday, was able to put in their 16 points. I know that he is starting to just get his full minutes allotment because he's been dealing with injuries all season long back up there. I think that is critical for St. Louis because he is the engine that makes the team run, and their go-to scorer along Gibson Jimerson, who's able to shoot it well from three-point range. They do face off against a Duquesne team that's been able to do a relatively solid job of being able to lock it down overall with regards to their defense, but they can be a little bit leaky with their three-point shooting defense, allowing opponents to shoot about 32.3% from three. It's above average, but it's nothing amazing, so this is a spot where at a 5 or less, I'm going to be willing with Duquesne, 6 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with St. Louis, and then 147 or less, looking at the over 148 or higher, the under 645, 646 on the betting board. It's Florida State, and they're going to be taking on Virginia Tech. This is going to be for the ACC tournament. That is this year out there in Washington, D.C., and with Virginia Tech, they're a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. Your total on this game is 152.5 to 153, and with Virginia Tech, I did set them as a favorite of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 3 to 3.5. The biggest thing for Virginia Tech, keeping their possessions clean. They go up against a Florida State team that is in the top 40 in turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Sean Badula has had his fair share of turnover concerns this season for Virginia Tech. He has been able to do a nice job leading the way with 16 points, 4.4 assists, but does turn the ball over 3.3 times per contest. Problem is, Florida State is usually a really good rebounding team. They got one guy on the roster right now that's giving them north of 5 rebounds per game. That'd be Jameer Watkins, 15 points, 6 boards, nearly 2 steals per contest. He's a nice do-it-all player. And then Darren Green Jr. shoots 39% from 3, supplies the team with about 12 points per contest. These are really the lone 2 guys on the roster, though, that shoot above 30% from 3-point range. Florida State as a whole, they shoot 32% from the outside. They don't have a lot of outside presence on offense. Primo Spears, he gives you 10 points, but he's, for lack of a better term, a chucker. He shoots 37.5% from the floor, 27.5% from 3, so he just chucks the ball at the rim and hopes and prays for something. Meanwhile, for Virginia Tech, Lynn Kidd should be able to do a solid job in this spot. He's been able to give the team about 6.5 rebounds per game, and it's not like this Virginia Tech team has been amazing on the glass. They're outside the top 125 in terms of their rebound rate as well, but Lynn Kidd, I do feel like, should be able to win that battle on the glass for a Virginia Tech team that's about 162nd in all of college basketball. In terms of their rebound rate, you've got a Florida State team that's only about 171st in the country as well in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Virginia Tech, even in their just downstate, and even though they do average about 17.7 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, they're still a top 65 team in terms of their overall offensive efficiency, with Tyler Nichols shooting 39% from 3, chipping in their 9 points per contest. Under Kadura gives you 13.5 points per contest, going up against a Florida State team that's outside the top 225 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Caveat with that is that they actually defend the 3 much better away from home rather than at home, but Florida State, top 40 team with regards to total possessions per game. This bunch has given up at least 74 points in each of their last 5 games, and this bunch has been able to get to at least 73 in each of their last 4, going up against a Virginia Tech unit that they've been giving it up as well, 76 plus points given up in 4 of their last 5. So did set my total 154 looking at the over, and with Virginia Tech, want to lay up to 3.5 with them. 647, 648 on the betting board. It is Wake Forest. They are going to be playing against Notre Dame out there at Capital One Arena, and with Wake Forest, they are an 8.5 to a 9-point favorite with your total 137. I set my line at a 6.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Notre Dame. Notre Dame had a very spirited effort the last time they played against Wake Forest. This was about a month or so ago, and in that ordeal, Notre Dame was able to get the job done by kind of 70 to 65. Wake Forest in that game actually shot it better from 3-point range, but for Wake Forest, they just got bogged down by the slow tempo of Notre Dame, and Notre Dame did a better job of protecting the ball, and that's the way that Notre Dame is operating. They had a harebrained game yesterday against Georgia Tech, but all in all, this is a unit that they're looking to play slow, controlled, make this game a complete and utter eyesore, and they just need to have Marcus Burton being able to protect the ball. He gives you 17.5 points, 4.3 assists, 2 steals per contest, but the 3.7 turnovers per game, that is a bottom 5 mark among qualifying players in all of college basketball for a Notre Dame team that is outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Even with yesterday's outburst, you have been able to have a few guys be able to step up, though. Jarek Kozinski, Braden Shrewsbury, along with Tay Davis. These 3 guys, they've been able to combine for about 26 to 27 points per contest. Shrewsbury is now shooting 37% from 3-point range, going up against a Wake Forest unit that just really doesn't have a lot of depth. You've got 2 guys on loan, Efton Reed, Austin Carr, that combined for about 14 rebounds per game. Cam Hildreth, Kevin Boopy Miller, Hunter Salles, these 3 guys are all able to give you at least 13.5 points per contest, with Hildreth and Miller both shooting about 36% from 3-point range. Miller's your main facilitator with 3.5 assists, 2.5 turnovers per game, and Salles chips in their 18.5 points on 41% three-point shooting. It's a Wake Forest team that's been one of your more efficient offenses in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. Wake Forest checking in 40th, but that does fall off by about 17.2 points per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and this Notre Dame unit has been able to do a nice job all season long of just finding a way to be able to guard the three-point line, of just being able to remain lively in general, because for Wake Forest, it's a little bit top-heavy with the way that they have been able to get their rebounding, and I do think that this Notre Dame team is going to be able to hold in with that respect. Wake Forest only about 136th in all of college basketball with regards to their rebound rate. Meanwhile, Notre Dame, they are checking in currently more around 120th, and this Notre Dame team has not been bad at being able to guard the three-point line. Notre Dame going into yesterday in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they're about 108th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Wake Forest, it's improved for them all season long, but when away from home, they have allowed opponents to shoot just 31.5% from three. So I do think that this is going to be a bogged down, little bit of a slower game. Semi-total 136.5. I'm going to be looking at the under. Notre Dame, I think they hold in there. Semi-line at 6.5. So taking the points, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total under. 649, 650 on the betting board. It is NC State and Syracuse doing battle. Syracuse opens up a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Total on this game between 152.5 and 153.5. I think the wrong team is favored. I said NC State as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be looking at them on the money line. Now with NC State, this is a bunch that just played yesterday, so they're going to be a little bit more tired out. And for Syracuse, they're really good at being able to generate turnovers. Top 25 team, of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but the kryptonite that you have with NC State not being able to rebound, that's going to be masked, as both of these teams outside the top 225 in terms of their rebound rate. For Syracuse, Mohamed Diarra, he's really the lone guy on the roster that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. He's been able to supply the team with 5.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 36.5% from three, and you do have now a little bit more help for DJ Horn, who's really been your main outside threat for this NC State team, shooting 43% from three, 17 points per game. You've had Jaden Taylor be able to step up, now shooting 36% from the outside, but what NC State does really well is what Syracuse feasts on. They don't turn the ball over. They turn the ball over 9.6 times per contest, top 15 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Syracuse, that's really how they flow pretty much everything that they do. Syracuse only shooting 33.5% from three. Now, to their credit, they only turn the ball over about 11 times per contest, but other than Malik Brown, who gives you 9.5 points, a block, 7 rebounds per game, you don't have a single guy on the roster that also gives you north of 4.6 rebounds per game. J.J. Starlin, Judah Mintz, these guys have been rock solid. They've been able to combine for about 32.5 points per contest. Mintz is able to throw in their 4.5 assists, 2 steals per contest, but I do look at the Syracuse team. They're not necessarily tremendous down low. I do think that NC State, though, they do have their issues in terms of guarding the three-point line. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They do a nice job of just being able to bust through against a Syracuse team that is a little bit all or nothing in the way that they tried to generate turnover. Syracuse as well, 237th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and I think Paul Security wins out. Set NC State as a 1.5 point favorite, looking at them on the money line, and did set my total 151.5. I do think that things get bogged down a little bit just because with NC State, they're not necessarily a super up-tempo team, and I do think that with Syracuse, they're going to have a tough time being able to get some good, clean looks, and neither team going to be able to generate a lot of second chances. So looking at the under and looking at NC State on the money line. 651, 652, numbers up for Clemson and Boston College, but I've got my handicap. I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 points with Clemson, 7.5 or more. Taking a look at the points with Boston College, set my total to where a 146.5 or less. I'm looking at the over 147.5 or higher to the under, as for Boston College, they're coming off of a nice win against Miami yesterday, and for Boston College, the main kryptonite you have with this team, giving up the three. They're well outside the top 230 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and Clemson should be able to own on the glass. Clemson, a top 40 team with rebound rate, as P.J. Hall, Ian Shefflin, they combine for north of 16 rebounds per game. And Hall, he's going to be very versatile. He's going to be very active. Block and a half, 19 points. Shoots about 32% per three, but I think Quinton Post can actually match up quite well. Quinton Post, true 7-footer for Boston College, who's logging 16.5 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, shooting north of 40% from three-point. He's been magnificent all season long. The question is, can you get ancillary production out of someone like a Devin McLaughlin, who gives you 10.5 points, 6 rebounds per contest? Jaden Zachary, he's done a nice job being able to take care of the ball. 4.5 assists, 1.9 turnovers per game for a Boston College team that, to their credit, they turn the ball over less than 11 times per game. It is a Clemson team that also knows quite a bit about ball security, and in a late game circumstance, this Clemson team as a collective, they do shoot 79% of the free throw line, all but one of their top 4 scorers shoots at least 78.5% of the free throw line. That'd be Shefflin, who shoots 76.7% at the charity stripe, also shooting 52% from three-point range. Should see that come down a little bit, but Chance Hunter has been able to do a nice job throwing their double figures. He hasn't necessarily been a great three-point shooter, but that's why you've got Joe Girard shooting north of 40% from three-point range as well. Clemson as a whole, they do an okay job of popping threes. They're neither amazing nor terrible, about 80th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage, going up against a unit that has been a little bit all over the place as well with Boston College. This team from three-point range overall this season going into yesterday, about 50th in the country, but that does fall to about 35.2% away from home. But I do think that Boston College is going to do a nice job of being able to hold on to the ball. Jack Clark has been able to help out the defense of Clemson as well. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit lower scoring than when these two teams hooked up in January, when that was 89-78, where neither team could really miss on that day. So circumstance where I'm going to be looking at a 146.5 or less to the over, 147.5 or higher to the under. But with Clemson, we'll only up to 6.5 with them, 7.5 or more. Going to be looking at those points with Boston College. 653, 654 on the betting board is going to be the DK Network Array to pick Central Florida and BYU to battle from the T-Mobile Center out there in Kansas City, Missouri. And Central Florida is a underdog of 5.5 to 6 points. Your total on this game is anywhere between 144.5 and 145, and my write-up here is going to be on BYU. I did set them as a 9-point favorite. This BYU unit, I just feel like is going to be able to take it to a Central Florida team that's now going to be playing game number 2 in 2 days. And for Central Florida, just such a vastly different team when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. For Central Florida, overall this season, it's a top 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've done a really good job of being able to put the screws down on teams on the glass as well when they bet at home. Away from home, completely different story. They're giving up 16.7 points more per 100 possessions in games played away from home. That is 131st in all of college basketball in that respect. And with Central Florida, they allow opponents to shoot just 30.3% from three-point range when at home. Away from home, this balloons up to 36.6%, which ranks 289th in the country. And that's an issue when you face off against a BYU team that is number 3 in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of shots that come from three-point range. BYU takes north of 50% of their field goal attempts from three-point range. If you can't guard the arc, that's an issue. Last time these two teams played, it was a case where Central Florida was able to storm back in Provo. That was a 90-88 game, but that required north of 60 points in the second half from a Central Florida team that is outside the top 240 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and I just don't think that Lightning is going to strike twice. It is a BYU unit that they themselves are not the same defense away from home rather than at home. Overall 35th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They give up about 11.4 points more per 100 possessions away from home, but you also have many more scoring options on this BYU team. 7 different guys that give you at least 9 points per contest. Jackson Robinson leads the way with 14 points, shoots about 35% from three-point range. But all in all, this is a BYU team that they're able to shoot 35% from three-point range, and this is a BYU team that is one of the better rebounding teams in all of college basketball. They've got pretty much 4 out of their top 6 scorers who are able to give you at least 4 rebounds per contest. You've got a pair of guys that both are able to give you at least 3 assists per contest. Actually, a trio of guys that give you at least 3 assists per contest. Jalen Hall, Ali Khalifa, Spencer Johnson are all able to do a nice job of being able to pass to Sugar, and to go up against a Central Florida team that does a solid job down low themselves. Abrima Diallo is able to give you about 2 blocks, 5 rebounds per game. Central Florida also has Omar Payne, who's able to give you a little bit over a block per contest. So as a result, you've got a UCF team that, with regards to rebound rate, they are 69th, very, very nice, but got a BYU team that's also 14th. And for BYU, though this offense has not been quite the same when they've been on the road rather than at home, both of these teams do have some pretty vast home and road splits. This is a BYU team that is averaging about 13.3 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. It's not as if the three-point shooting percentage takes like a precipitous drop off away from home. They're still shooting about 33% from three-point range when away from home. Noah Waterman has some size. He's able to shoot about 37.5% from three-point range. Holloway, I mentioned before, shoots 36% from the outside. And with Central Florida having to play their second game in 2 days, with them being such a different team on the road rather than at home, going against the BYU unit that their offense comes in good form, 74 points or more scored in 4 of their last 5 games, the one exception coming against Iowa State. I do think that BYU gets the job done, covers this number. My write-up pick is laying the points with BYU, made them a 9-point favorite, and I did set my total 143. I do think that with this being a little bit of an earlier game, with Central Florida playing their second game in 2 days and just flat out not being a great offensive team, I don't think that they do their part with this total. So looking at the under in my write-up, that is on BYU laying the number. 655, 656 on the betting board. It is TCU facing off against Oklahoma out there in the T-Mobile Center, and TCU is a 2.5 to a 3-point favorite. Total is 144.5. I did set my total at a 144.5 myself, so waiting on a little bit of line movement here. We did see some earlier numbers to where this was more around about 145, 145.5, and if we do get to 145 or greater, that is going to be my buy point on the under. You do have a TCU team that is in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game, but you have an Oklahoma team that has done a really good job of being able to guard the 3-point line all season long. They are a top 20 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and I do think that keeps them lively in this game. I did set Oklahoma as a result as a 2.5-point underdog here at the 3. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, TCU has been able to do a really solid job by committee of being able to just hit the glass, but you're able to say that about both teams. As for Oklahoma, Jalen Moore, he gives you about 6 rebounds per game, but he's really the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for TCU, you've had Emmanuel Miller do a nice job with his overall versatility. He's able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. He's able to do a nice job of just being able to give you some very good distribution in general, as well as he's able to give you a few assists, 13 plus points per contest. As for TCU, you've got pretty much a trio of different guys that do give you at least 2.2 assists per contest as well. I like the game of Jameer Nelson Jr. He's been able to knock down threes. He's been able to give you double figures for a TCU team that they do a nice job being able to generate turnovers. A top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, while being able to shoot about 36% from 3. Miller, I was alluding to, shoots about 39% from the outside. Avery Anderson is able to give you about 3.5 assists per contest as well. But for Oklahoma, you do have Ortega away, who's been able to give you 11 points on 38.5% 3-point shooting himself. And out of your top 4 scorers, you do have 3 guys that shoot at least 38.5% from 3. Now for Oklahoma, they do have some pretty big home and road splits. They are scoring more than 14 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are away from home rather than when they are at home. But you've got a TCU team that sees a drop off of more than 12 points per 100 possessions when they're away from home as well. Though I will say, they actually shoot a little bit better from 3-point range away from home rather than at home. About 36% from distance is what they do shoot away from home. But I do think that Oklahoma and their perimeter defense are going to be able to take that away. You got an Oklahoma team that they themselves are only shooting about 30.5% from 3-point range away from home. And the 12.3 turnovers per game, that's a little bit costly. But at the same time, you do have a TCU team that they themselves turn the ball over about 12.7 times per contest. So I do think that there's a lot of similarities with these teams. They both do a nice job rebounding by committee. And for Oklahoma, they've been able to get their offense going a little bit more recently. They've gotten past the 70-point plateau in 4 of their last 5 games. You do have a TCU unit that has now given up at least 70 points in each of their last 3 games. So very interesting circumstance. I do think that the defense, though, wins out semi-total 144.5. So you're at a 145 or higher looking at the under. And I'm going to be willing to take anything of 3 or more here with Oklahoma. 657, 658 on the betting board. It is Kansas State and Texas doing battle from the old T-Mobile Center, and with Texas, they are back to being a favorite between 4.5 to 5 points on this game, between 142.5 and 143.5, and with Texas, I did set them as a favorite of 6 points, so circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Texas. They've been able to get quite a bit more down low recently than they have throughout the entirety of the season. And while Kansas State is still going to be the better rebound rate team, you've got someone like a Will McNair who's able to give you 6 rebounds per game. David Ngesson, he's done a nice job down low. He and Arthur Kaluma combined for about 13.5 rebounds per game. It's a Texas team that does a far better job of taking care of the ball while being okay at being able to generate turnovers. Each of your top 4 scorers for Texas do generate at least a steal per game, with Max Abmas going to be the best, in my opinion, pure scorer in this game. 17 points, 4.5 assists, shoots 37% from 3 points. For a Texas team that they turn the ball over 11.5 times per contest, they shoot 36.5% from 3, going up against the Kansas State unit that is turning the ball over 14.8 times per game. Bottom 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and are just lacking 3-point shooting. You've got one guy in the roster that shoots about 33.3% from 3-point range, and that's Arthur Kaluma at more around 35 to 35.5% from 3. Gives you about 15 points per contest, 2 assists. And for Tyler Perry, he does give you about 4.5 assists. He's been able to generate a few turnovers, chips in there about 15 points on 33% 3-point shooting. Well, Cam Carter has been a little bit of a do-it-all guy. 5 boards, about 15 points per contest. But I just take a look at this Texas team where you're able to get down low out of Dylan Mitchell. What you've been able to get out of Dylan Dessou, continues to shoot north of 50% from 3-point range. Was dealing with an illness about a week or 2 ago, but should be all good to go in this one. I do think that Texas is going to blow away a Kansas State team that just has not been able to get it going on offense. 72 points or fewer scored in each of their last 3 games. Kansas State, a team that's outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, for Texas, they have given up 80 plus in their last 2 games, but offense is really getting working now, at least 80 plus points in each of their last 4 games. So, circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay with Texas. Did set them as a 6-point favorite, and this is out there in the great state of Missouri. I do think that this game gets bogged down just a little bit. Semi-total out of 142. I'm going to be looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Texas. 659, 660 on the betting board. Kansas is going to be playing against Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite, totals between 137 and 137.5. Such an interesting circumstance here because this is almost a pseudo home game for Kansas. The Sprint Center is pretty much our home away from home. I set Kansas as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. Maybe this is just the schmuck in me because Kansas is going to be without their top 2 scorers. Kevin McCullough, Hunter Dickinson, they're out of the fold, but I've liked what I've seen out of KJ Adams this year. He gives you 12 points. He's not a guy that's going to pop it from 3 or anything, but 4.5 boards, 3 assists, well-rounded 6'7" combo player. Johnny Furphy is going to need to step up, and he's been able to. He's been able to shoot about 36.5% from 3-point range. He shoots pretty much the same at home as he does on the road. DeJuan Harris is also a really good point guard. Now, they need him to score. You need DeJuan Harris to have a big game in this one, but they also go up against a Cincinnati team that is outside the top 100 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. With Dickinson out, Cincinnati is now going to be able to dominate the glass. They probably were going to start with Cincinnati, top 30 team with regards to the rebound rate, but you've got Aziz Bendengo is able to give you about 7.5 boards, a block and a half per contest. Dan Skillings, Victor Lakeen both give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, and for this Cincinnati team, you do have Simeus Lukasius, who's got all sorts of versatility. 10 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, shoots about 35.5% from 3, but that team as a whole, they shoot 32% from the outside, they shoot less than 69% at the free throw line, and Kansas has been a relatively solid defense all season long. A top 45 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Kansas, I think, is going to do a solid job holding up from beyond the arc as well. They do allow opponents to shoot 35% from 3 in games played away from home, but I don't know if Cincinnati is going to be able to execute there, and Cincinnati, they do have a little bit of a tougher time guarding the perimeter as well. Away from home, opponents have been able to shoot north of 36% from 3, and that's going to be the big equalizer for Kansas. You're probably going to be seeing Nicholas Timberlake, who's trying to bring Sexy back, giving you a few more minutes. Marco Jackson, someone has been buried on the bench after he was getting starts towards the beginning part of the season. He's going to need to step up, but the talent level of the guys on the bench for Kansas, I do think that they're going to be able to give you a little bit of something. And for Kansas, the depth is going to be an issue making a run in this tournament, but that's not mattering in this game as much just because they aren't tired yet, because this is going to be their first game of the conference tournament. So I did set Kansas as a favorite of 1.5 points. I'm going to be looking at them on the money line. I did set my total at a 137.5. I think the Kansas going to be going bombs away from 3, and I think that this game close enough for late game felling. So looking at the 137 over, and Kansas on the money line. 661, 662 on the card. Rice, we give our out to Lane Kiffin go Owls. They play against Wichita State. This is from Fort Worth, Texas, the Dickies Arena, as Wichita State a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. Total on this game 140 to 140.5. This is happening in the home state for Rice in Texas. I don't think that that's going to do too much for them, though. I did set Wichita State as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. With Wichita State, I think that they're going to do a good job of being able to manhandle the glass. You've got 3 separate guys that have been able to give you at least 5.5 rebounds per game. Dallin Reginald, Quincy Ballard, Kenny Poto, and that should be able to win out for them. And Harnell Beverly, who's really been one of their main facilitators, giving you about 3 assists, 11 points per contest. He's also now giving you about 5 rebounds per game as well, and they're going to be matched up with Max Fiedler, who's got great versatility for Rice. About 10 points, 9 boards. He gives out 5 assists as a true 6'11" big man, but for Rice, they are outside the top 200 in terms of rebound rate. Not saying that this is a Wichita State team that's like the just absolute monsters on the glass or anything like that, but that's up for Wichita State in terms of their rebound rate. They're checking in the top 75 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Wichita State, you've got a nice go-to scorer in Kobe Rogers, who's been able to shoot 41% from 3-point range, gives you about 2 assists, 15 plus points per contest, while Xavier Bell has been able to do a nice job being that number 2 option with about 11.5 points per game. And for Rice, it's just been touch and go for this offense all season long. Travis Evie, Makai Mason, they combine for about 30.5 points per contest. They both shoot in the neighborhood of 33 to 34% from 3-point range, but you're just expecting better outside shooting from Rice. They're only shooting 33% from the outside. You knew that their defense was going to be bad. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of both points allowed on a per possession basis and opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, which in this case is not the world's worst thing with the way that Wichita State is shooting less than 32% from 3-point range as a collective, but for Rice, they don't really do a nice job of guarding the interior as well, because Fiedler is pretty much a man on an island. As a result, Rice 310th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Wichita State, they're clocking in more around about 144th. I do think that Wichita State finds a way to be able to, at the very least, hold Fiedler down to not just completely taking over the game, and that'll be enough for them to be able to get it done. I did set my total 142.5. I have a Rice team that just has played no defense all season long, so looking at the over. And Wichita State, by the way, 74 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games, so like that over, and we'll lay up to 4 with Wichita State. 663, 664 on the betting board. It is UT San Antonio. Meet for the Roadrunners. They play against Temple. We give our own to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, says Temple finds themselves as a very, very slight 1-point favorite. In other places, there are pick'em total on scheme between 150 and 151. In this pick'em line, I did roll with Temple. I did set them as a 1.5-point favorite. I think that this team is starting to find it a little bit more, and this is a rematch of a game that we saw mere days ago. That came down to the bitter end. Temple was able to win on a buzzer beater by Heisey or Miller, and I think that he's going to be the key in this game as well. As he's been tremendous for this Temple bunch. He's able to give you 15 plus points. He's able to dole out about 4.5 assists. He's been able to bring in there about 3.5 rebounds per game as well. This for a Temple team that they're only shooting about 31.2% from distance, less than 40% from the floor, but they get to go up against a Roadrunners team that is well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's 344th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Away from home, opponents shoot 38.9% from 3-point range, and Temple has actually been a better defense on the road rather than at home. For Temple overall this season, they're allowing opponents to shoot 33.9% from 3. That drops to 30.9% in a road or neutral court venue, and for Temple, this is not some sort of an amazing defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are checking in more in that neighborhood of about 231st, but again, they do give up 3.2 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. They are outside the top 225 with regards to rebound rate, and UT San Antonio is a top 125 team in terms of their rebound rate, so that means that they're going to need to be able to get some production out of someone like Jordan Riley, who gives you about 6 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for UTSA, Carlton Lingard has a good versatility. He's able to supply double figures. He's able to give you about 6 boards. Shoots only about 31% from 3, but at size, he's able to pop those threes. While Jordan Ivy Curry goes to work as the main scorer, 17 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, shoots 37 to 38% from 3 points for a UTSA team that, being a top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game, the 11.5 turnovers, absolutely acceptable for them, but I do think that Temple finds a way to continue to have their offense clicking, as they've now been able to get to at least 72 points in 3 of their last 5 games. I do think that we're going to see things be a little bit more scoring than they were the last time around, even though UTSA has been quite awful with their defense. I mean, these two teams shot a combined 21 of 50 from 3-point range, and Temple is a bottom 50 team in all of college basketball in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. So again, they've been a little bit better. I did set my total at 153.5, so I still think we're going to get an up-tempo game. The Dickies Arena, it's not necessarily too bad in terms of the shooter's eyes, so I certainly don't think we get what we got the last time around, but I think a little bit too much of an adjustment has been made looking at the over, and with Temple, we'll lay up to a point with them. Now we head out to lovely Las Vegas for the Mountain West Tournament. 665, 666. Fresno St and Wyoming do battle. Wyoming is a 7 to a 7.5 point favorite. Seeing an 8 out there as well. Totals between 137 and 137.5. I could only make Wyoming a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Fresno State. Now, the Fresno State team has been bad, and they have been really bad. They are a bunch as without Eduardo Andre 3000, who I really liked in the post. When he went down with an injury, things went from not great to absolutely horrible for Fresno State, but with Wyoming, despite the fact that they actually do allow fewer points on a per possession basis away from home rather than at home, this is also a team that they score about 14 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. They're going to be very reliant on their 3-point shooting, as you've got a Cool Cot, Sam Griffin, along with Brandon Wetzel. All guys that shoot between 37.7 and 39% from 3-point range. Between this trio, you're able to get in that pocket about 43 points per contest, and been able to get a little bit down low with about 7 boards out of Cam and Waywoo, but you've got a Wyoming team that's well outside the top 125 with regards to their rebound rate, and you've got a Fresno State team that has Anyak Boyaki, who's been able to give you 8 rebounds per game. Fresno State also has Isaiah Hill, who does a nice job doling it out. 6 assists, 12 points per contest. Not a great 3-point shooter, but Xavier Dussel, Donovan Yap, they combined shoot 37% from the outside with a combined 20 points per game, and even though it's been rough for Fresno State in terms of taking care of the ball, they're well outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They're down to about 12 turnovers per game. It is a Wyoming unit that has been touch and go with their offense as well. They have scored now 72 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, it's a Fresno State team that they have failed to get past the 66-point plateau in 4 of their last 5. But you just take a look at some of the competition: New Mexico, Nevada, San Diego State. List goes on and on. This is also a rematch of a game that we saw in Fresno a few days ago. Wyoming won that game 86-47 on a night where Fresno State shot 28.5% from the floor. I do think that things are going to turn around for them. I do think that Isaiah Pope, who's been able to come in, has been able to give the team about 8.5 points per contest, has been seeing more usage recently. I think that he's going to do an okay job in this circumstance against a Wyoming team that really doesn't generate a lot of turnovers, against a Wyoming team that is vulnerable from 3, allowing opponents to shoot about 34.5% from distance, while Fresno State, they themselves, well inside the top 3 with that regard. So I did set my total at a 140, even though this is going to be a low possession game. Both of these teams have not executed on defense, so I'm looking at the over. And with Wyoming, made them a 4-point favorite, so I'm going to be looking at the points with Fresno. 667, 668 on the betting board. It is San Jose State, and they're going to be playing against Colorado State. Old San Jose State is a 15.5 to a 15-point underdog. The last game between 137.5 to 138. Did set my total more around a 141.5, so I'm going to be looking at the over. San Jose State, well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, but this has been a defense that has just been getting thoroughly cooked all season long. San Jose State outside the top 280 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, for San Jose State, this is a unit that, they've got a really good core 4 that is able to help them out. Alvaro Cardenas has been able to give you 12 points. He throws in there about 5.5 assists per contest. Trey Anderson, along with Tibet Gronair, they combine for 24 points. They shoot it well from 3-point range as well. You've been able to get some relatively good production out of Myron Amy as well. MJ Amy has been able to give you about 15 points per contest. Some call him Myron, some call him MJ, whichever you want to go with. He's been relatively solid, but this team has just not been able to stop a nosebleed all season long, and now they go up against a unit in Colorado State that has Isaiah Stevens supplying 17 points, 7 assists, and shoots 45.5% from 3. And I will say this about San Jose State. If you're looking for one selling point on them, they give up 6 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and they are going to be going up against a Colorado State team that has their very clear imperfections on defense as well. Colorado State were 29th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you've also got Nikwe Clifford, who's been very versatile. Shoots 40% from 3, 12.5 points, 7.5 boards per contest. Patrick Cartier, he's able to shoot 37.5% from the outside. Guy with size that stands right around about 6'8" or so. And for the San Jose State team, they're just going to be completely outgunned on the glass as well. In terms of their rebound rate, San Jose State, reason why they had success last year, were one of the top teams in all of college basketball. They went from a top 25 team in terms of rebound rate last season to 345th. This season. Now they do have to go up against a Colorado State team that, while they've been struggling a little bit more on offense, this is a little bit more of a low-tempo team. They're still a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. For Colorado State, they only shoot about 32.5% from 3-point range away from home, but with San Jose State being well outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, with Colorado State also not turning the ball over. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 to 11 times per contest, and that's one good thing San Jose State has done. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, at the very least, they're getting clean possessions. I do think that this is going to be a game where we're going to see some scoring, even though it's going to be lower possessions. So I told 141.5, looking at the over. But with Colorado State, I do think that they go out there, they're going to be able to put up a good number on this one. But I do think that San Jose State, with that core 4 and a one-game just sort of one-off, I do think that they do just enough to hold within this number against a Colorado State team that the last time they won by north of double figures, you have to go all the way back to Valentine's Day. So I did set my line at a 13.5 here at the 15 to 15.5. Going to be looking at the points. Set my total 141.5. Also looking over 669, 670 on the betting board. New Mexico is going to be playing against Air Force. Air Force is a 14.5 to a 15-point underdog. Also out there in lovely Las Vegas. Total on this game is 144.5. Made my total 145 here at the 144.5. I do like this total over for Air Force. They've actually been more efficient on offense and on defense away from home rather than at home. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And Ryan Petraeus, talk about a guy that's putting the team on his back. 15 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 1.7 steals per contest. And then you got a pair of guys in Bo Becker along with Ethan Taylor who have been able to combine for just under 28 points per contest. 4 assists. They combine to shoot about 38% from 3-point range for an Air Force team that, to their credit, they actually shoot shoot about 36.5% from three-point range in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. It is an Air Force unit that overall they're about 195th, but you look at what they do in a road/neutral court environment, they're a top 100 offense. Meanwhile, you've got a New Mexico team that is not necessarily amazing with their three-point shooting, but this is a top 12 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they got a fearsome threesome. Jalen House, Donovan Dent, Javal Mashburn Jr., they all give between 15 to 15.1 points per contest. House and Dent have been able to combine for 9 assists, 3.5 steals per contest, with Dent shooting 36% from three-point range, and New Mexico is going to be able to dominate on the glass. You've got JT Toppin, you've got Nelly Jr. Joseph. These two guys have been able to combine for about 17 rebounds per game, and I mean, it's just a very interesting tale of the tape. Last time Air Force went on the road and knocked off New Mexico outright when these two teams played by kind of 78 to 77 after New Mexico went on the road and completely punked Air Force 85 to 66, and a night where they went just 4 of 19 from three-point range for New Mexico. So I do think that we're going to get a little bit more scoring in this one. It is an Air Force team that's well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, but with the way that Air Force does not have a lot of size, they're one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of rebound rate. Meanwhile, New Mexico, a top 60 team in the country with that regard. I do think that a New Mexico team that, to their credit, they've been able to score at least 77 points in each of their last 4 games, going up against an Air Force team that's given up at least 74 in 4 out of their last 5, and at least 72 in every one of them. It's going to be able to dominate. I did set New Mexico as a favorite here of 15 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number and set my total at 145. I'm also going to be looking at the over to go along with New Mexico laying the 14.5. 671, 672. This is from the T-Mobile Arena out here in lovely Las Vegas. USC and Washington do battle. Washington is a underdog of 3.5 to 4 points. Total on this game is 153 to 153.5. This was an opener of 1, and I think we went a little bit too far. Set my number at 2. I'm going to be willing to take the points. USC is probably getting steam because they've been able to build up some momentum ever since Boogie Ellis and Isaiah Collier have returned back into the fold, and those are their main 2 guards, and they've been able to do a solid job of being able to give this team exactly what they need in the scoring department. Both give you 16.6 points per contest, combined for about 7.2 assists, 3 steals per contest, and Ellis has been able to shoot 42% from three-point range. The problem for USC, though, is that they're still well outside the top 225 in terms of rebound rate. DJ Rodman is the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 4.3 rebounds per game. Vincent Iwuchukwu just hasn't panned out. Got Joshua Morgan giving you a few blocks down low, but this team is well outside the top 150 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage as well. And for Washington, you've got the Kentucky connection in Xavier Wheeler and Keon Brooks. They've been able to combine for 35.5 points. Brooks is a do-it-all player that gives you 7 boards, shoots 39.5% from 3. Wheeler gets loose with that 3.3 turnovers per game, and he also provides 6 assists per contest, but we've also got Moses Wood shooting about 38.5% from 3, 11.5 points per game, and maybe it's just me, but I do feel like we're going to get a little bit of an inspired effort from Washington. Mike Hopkins has been relieved of his duties. I believe that he's still going to be on the sidelines for this game, but he is not going to be brought back, and you have to feel like Washington is going to get that win-1 for their Gipper speech that it's going to be able to fire them up. Braxton Maya should be able to do a nice job down low at 7'1". He's been able to provide about 5.5 rebounds per game, and for this Washington unit, they aren't necessarily the same defense away from home rather than at home, as they actually hold opponents to shooting less than 30% from three-point range when they're at home in a roadside-neutral court setting. This balloons up to 36.5%, but also have a USC team that they allow opponents to shoot 38.5% from three-point range away from home. I do think that Washington, with guys like Paul Mukay and company, are going to provide just enough to be able to get the job done on this line. I set my number at 2, so I'm going to be willing to take those points with Washington. Did set my total 154. Washington is a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. USC is one of the least efficient defenses in all of college basketball. It's been able to find their swagger on offense as well. 78-plus points for USC in each of their last 3 games. We've got a Washington unit that has been able to provide at least 74 in each of their last 5 as well. So looking at the overhand, the points with Washington, 673, 674 on the betting board. UCLA and Oregon State do battle from lovely Las Vegas with UCLA. They are a 6.5 to a 7-point favorite, and your total on this game is 126 to 127.5. I did say UCLA as a favorite of 7 points. Here at the 6.5, it's a maximum willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it for Oregon State. They give up north of 16 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and they've got just such big home and road splits because Corvallis does provide them a good, just general home court. It's a very difficult place to be able to travel to. You do have the Pope and Jordan Pope for this Oregon State team, providing 17.5 points, 3.5 assists, shoots 37% from three-point range for an Oregon State team that's pretty slow tempo. They do turn the ball over about 12.5 times per contest, but they go up against a UCLA team that I'm not going to call them amazing with their defense by any stretch of the imagination. They're outside the top 200 in terms of the opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but they're not going to be hurt too badly with the way that Oregon State is structured, and they're just by far the better defense in this spot. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, UCLA, they're a top 100 team with that regard. Meanwhile, you've got an Oregon State unit that, overall, it's about 259th, but again, they're giving up about 17.5 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home, and they don't have a lot down low. Adam Bona is able to give you about 6 boards per contest, should be able to win this battle. You've got Lazer Stefanovic, who's able to give you a few boards. He pops it from 3 in the mid-30s for a UCLA team that legitimately is outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's right on par with this Oregon State unit as well. With UCLA, they're about 172nd as well in terms of their rebound rate, while Oregon State, they're chipping in there, not too many rebounds, 264th in the country. You've got Michael Rataj, Tyler Bladue, who are both able to give you 4.8 rebounds per game. Those are the lone 2 guys on the roster that give you north of 4 boards per contest. And for UCLA, you do have someone in Sebastian Mack, who's been the Mack truck for this team, giving you about 12.5 points. He's able to throw in there a steal and a half per contest for a UCLA team that does a good job taking care of the ball with about 10.5 turnovers per game. I do think that this game is going to be quite a bit of an eyesore. Both of these teams have had a tough time with their jump shooting all season long, so did set my total 129. I think we've gone a little bit too low with this total just because Oregon State really does give it up away from home, and Oregon State has been a really good over team all season long. So I'm looking at the over, and with UCLA, willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 675, 676 on the betting board. California is going to be playing against Stanford. Stanford out here in lovely Las Vegas is a 1.5 to a 2.5 point favorite. Your total is between 150 and 150.5. Set Stanford as a 2.5 point favorite. Willing to lay up to 2 with them. It's a Stanford unit that has not been the same team away from home rather than at home, and I have to think that Jared Hass's job is on the line if he doesn't win this game. I mean, my goodness, he has been given 500 billion opportunities, but this is a Cal unit that is outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and they've got nice scorers, and Jalen Tyson, Fardaws Amick, these 2 guys that combine for 34 points, 17.5 boards. Tyson is able to shoot 36% from 3-point range, but they just haven't been able to give you any semblance of defense whatsoever. And for Stanford, they're actually giving up a point less per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. The Stanford offense takes a nosedive. They score about 18 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. Shoot north of 40% from 3 at home, sub 34.5% away from home. But for the Stanford unit, they have been able to do a relatively solid job of being able to find guys that are able to pop in from 3, along with having Maximine Reynaud down low, who's been able to supply you with darn near double-double. 15.5 points, 9.5 boards per contest. You've got Brandon Angel shooting 46.5% from 3-point range. Keeping up with the Joneses, Michael Jones has been able to shoot about 43.5% from the outside. He chips in their 10.5 points per game. The team has been without Jared Bynum for quite a while. That's their main point guard with about 5 assists per contest, and he's going to be out once again in this one. But for Cal, they've had a tough time just getting good facilitation in general. Tyson has had to be your main point guard, and Jalen Celestine, he's able to shoot 44% from the outside, but with the way that Cal has just not been able to defend, and the way that Cal just, even though they've got Jalen Tyson along Fardaws Amick, they haven't been necessarily amazing on the glass. Now, it's not to say that the Stanford team is going to be necessarily winning that battle on the just boards. 233rd is Stanford with regards to their rebound rate. Cal, though, is just 170th. I do think that Stanford has a little bit more firepower and a little bit more depth, so I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. Won't lay up to 2 with them, and I did set my total at 152.5. You've got very friendly rims out there at T-Mobile, so looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2 with Stanford. 677, 678 on the betting board. Utah is going to be playing against Arizona State. Arizona State is a underdog of between 5.5 to 6 points. Drawn's game is 144, and with Arizona State, I did set them as a underdog of 7 points. So this is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay with Utah. Utah's given up north of 22 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, but this Arizona State team just simply can't shoot. They actually do an okay job of taking care of the ball. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, and it's an Arizona State team that you wouldn't know it from their point outputs, but they're a top 150 team in terms of total possessions per game, and if you do have trepidation with Utah, it is that they shoot as a collective less than 68% at the free throw line, but they should be able to control this game as you got an Arizona State team well outside the top 3 with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, Brandon Carlson, Kiba Kita, both of these guys have been able to combine for about 13 rebounds per game, with Carlson being your top scorer, 17.5 points. He, from 3-point range as a 7-footer, is able to shoot about 37% from 3. Gabe Madsen shoots more, around 39% from 3 as well. For a Utah team that has been relatively solid at taking care of the ball, 11.5 turnovers per game. Davion Smith and what he's been able to do with the injured Raleigh Worcester has been amazing. 6.5 assists, 12.5 points per contest. And for Arizona State, you do have a trio in the backcourt that's able to give you double figures. Adam Miller, Frankie Collins, Jose Perez. These 3 guys, they're combining for about 40 points per contest, with Perez shooting 40% from three. But again, this team shoots 65.5% of the free throw line, 30% from three-point range. And for Arizona State, this is a bunch that they will give up some open looks from the outside. Arizona State, away from home, they allow opponents to shoot 37.5% from three-point range. Utah, they've got an issue with that as well. They allow opponents to shoot 37% in a road/neutral court setting, so it does make for an interesting circumstance. I did set my total at a 145. Arizona State, not a great offense, but they play with a lot of possessions, and this is a bunch that they really do give it up on the road, so I'm looking at the over, and I'm going to be one away with Utah, set them as a 7-point favorite. Now we go to the Big East tournament out there in New York, Madison Square Garden, 679, 680 on the betting board. It is Butler. They are going to be playing against Xavier. Xavier is a 1 to 2 point favorite, and your total on this game is 150 to 150.5, and I set Butler as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be looking at them on the money line. These two teams, as a matter of fact, actually just played a few days ago, and for Butler, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time keeping up with Abdul Usman. He's the main man down low for a Xavier team that is going to have an advantage on the glass. Xavier, a top 85 team with regards to their rebound rate. Butler, they are a little bit outside the top 200, but when it comes to the Xavier unit, they just aren't the same offensive team as they were a season ago. Turning the ball over about 11.5 times per contest, which isn't bad, but they shoot about 34.5% from three. Quincy Alveri is going to be the best overall scorer in this game, 19.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 43% from three-point range. Davion McKnight has good versatility, 5 assists, 12.5 points, shoots 38.5% from three himself, but outside those main three and Alveri, McKnight, along with Desmond Claude, who gives you 16 points per contest, nobody else really gives you north of 7 points per contest. Meanwhile, you've got a Butler unit in which you've got 4 separate guys that give you at least 11 points per contest. Posh Alexander is a really good facilitator. He's able to give you about 5 assists. He throws in there a few steals per contest. And when these two teams hooked up a few days ago, Butler was able to get that win by a count of 72 to 66, despite shooting just 6 of 24 from three-point range. Granted, that was on their home floor, but they did a good job of being able to win the turnover battle 15-9. That despite the fact that they did lose a rebound battle, which I think that they're going to do once again. But Jalen Thomas, he's able to give you about 6 boards, 7.5 points per contest. Andre 3000 screen, he's been able to give you a few boards, so he's been really pushed out of the rotation a little bit more for the guard in Finley, Bajak, who's been able to give you 4.5 points. He shoots about 30 or so percent from three-point range. He's been very hot and cold with that regard, but when he's hot, he's hot. And trust me, he has been very cold recently, but DJ Davis is also able to give you about 14 or so points per contest against a Xavier team that they've had a tough time being able to guard the arc away from home. They allow opponents to shoot 36.4% from three now. I think both teams are going to have a little bit of difficulty here at MSG. It typically doesn't necessarily provide the world's greatest shooting backdrop. I've just noticed a lot of these games involving college basketball teams, they do go under just a little bit, but Butler, they do a good job of being able to guard the arc away from home, allowing opponents to shoot 31.1% from the outside. I do think that Butler, in a nip-and-tuck game, is going to be able to find a way to be able to get the job done. So, did set them as a 2-point favorite. Going to be willing to take Butler outright on the money line, and did set my total 152 as well. Even though it is a little bit tougher to be able to score in MSG, it is the Xavier team that's looking to play with a lot of tempo. I do think that this game comes down to some late-game fouling as well. So, when I had the over and the money line with Butler, 681, 682 on the betting board. Georgetown and Providence are doing battle from MSG, with Providence a 10 to a 10.5 point favorite. Your total on this game between 142 and 143, and with Providence, I did set them as a 12-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Georgetown is outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, as they are allowing opponents to shoot 37% from three-point range, and they really only have one rebounder on their team. That would be Supreme Cook, who has been a Supreme Cook down low, give you a double-figure amount of points, 8 rebounds per game, but for Georgetown, they're only about 180th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate, and for Providence, it's been tough since Bryce Hopkins has been out of the fold, but they're still a top 150 team in terms of rebound rate, and they've got the most versatile player out there on the floor, as you've been able to get just everything that you need out of Devin Carter. Has been able to do a nice job supplying 19.5 points, 8.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, really keeping this Providence team that is a bit top-heavy afloat. Josh Oduru has been your number 2 guy, 16 points per game. Nobody else really gives you north of 9, but Dickie Gaines, he's able to take the load off a little bit from the outside, as he, coupled with also Jaden Pierre, have been able to combine to shoot about 35% from 3. They both give you about 8.8 points per contest, and for Georgetown, they're very reliant upon the scoring of Jalen Epps, who's been able to give you 18 points, 4.5 assists, but doesn't necessarily shoot it well from three-point range. And Providence has continued to be a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Offense has been a little bit more suspect. They do turn the ball over north of 12 times per contest, but so does this Georgetown team. As for Providence, they do a relatively solid job of being able to lock down from three-point range away from home. They allow opponents to shoot 33.1% from the outside, which away from home, that's a top 175 mark in all of college basketball. And they go up against a Georgetown unit that does have Dontrez Styles, giving you double figures. Rowan Brumba, he's been up and down as well, but for Georgetown, only about 197th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I do think that Georgetown going to get a lambasted once again in the old Ed Cooley rivalry. I know that Ed wants to stick it to Providence. I don't think he's going to be able to do so. I did set my total at 146 with the way that Georgetown has been playing defense. I do think that Providence is going to be able to get some very nice open looks, and I do think that they're going to be able to push this total over. It's going to be willing to lay up to 11.5 with Providence, and looking at this total over 683, 684 on the betting board. Villanova and DePaul do battle from MSG, with Villanova a 23 to a 23.5 point favorite. Total on this game 136 or 136.5. I set my line at 22. I'm going to be willing to take the points with DePaul. It's been a sad, just deplorable effort from them in general, but I do think that perhaps the MSG site droppings could lead to a few more misses for Villanova for them to be able to cover, as Villanova is going to be able to win the battle down low. Eric Dixon along Tyler Burton, these two guys have been absolutely incredible on the glass, giving you 12.5 rebounds per game. Dixon is able to give you 16 points per contest, and he along TJ Bamba combined to shoot about 36.5% from three-point range. And for Villanova, to their credit, this defense has been very incredible. They've given up fewer than 70 points in all but one of their games since the beginning of the month of February, lone exception when they face off against UConn in late February. And this is a DePaul team that they have been the exact opposite. This DePaul unit has given up now at least 77 points in each of their last 7 games. They have actually given up at least 77 points in every game ever since the beginning of the month of February, but they do have their top scorer, Chico Carter, back. He's been able to give you 11.5 points, 3.5 assists, shoots about 36% from three-point range, and it is a DePaul unit that they shoot it well at the free throw line at 73.5%. We're looking to be as complimentary as possible. Jalen Terry shoots 45% from 3 8 points per contest, but don't have a single guy that gives you north of 4 boards per contest. DePaul outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They are outside the top 200 in terms of rebound rate. Villanova should be able to win this game and win this game convincingly, but with the way that they've really bogged things down, with the way that they have scored 71 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, I just don't think that they're going to be able to quite win this game by margin. Now, I did set my total at 138. I do think that Villanova is going to be able to threaten 80 in this spot, but I think that DePaul does enough to be able to get to like more of a 58, 59 to be able to just do enough to be able to cover. I did set my line at 22, so looking at the points with DePaul and the over 685, 686 on the betting board. It's the Big Ten tournament out there in Minneapolis. Rutgers and Maryland do battle. Maryland is a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. Totals between 125 and 126.5, and when it comes to Rutgers, I did set them as a underdog of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Maryland. This is a Maryland squad that has had a rough go of it all season long, but they're going to have the best scorer out there on the floor, and that'd be Jameer Young. Jameer Young has been able to give you 20 points, 4 boards, 4 assists for a Maryland team that does have Julian Reese, who's able to give you 10 rebounds per game. And for Rutgers, you thought that the bread and butter of this team was going to be down low, having Cliff Amarui, who's able to give you multiple blocks, who's able to give you 8 rebounds per game, but they're outside the top 175 in terms of their rebound rate. You've also got a Rutgers team that just flat out is outside the top 300 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. They've gotten a little bit of a boost ever since they have gotten back into the fold. The tempered transfer in Jeremiah Williams. Williams, 12.5 points, but only shooting 20% from 3, and each of your top 5 scorers for Rutgers, they're shooting less than 31.5% from 3, with only one player shooting above 29.5% from distance. Noah Fernandez has been able to shoot about 35.5% from the outside, but hasn't been able to do a ton for the team with just 6.5 points per game. Meanwhile, for Maryland, they themselves, in terms of road 3-point shooting percentage, bottom 10 team in all of college basketball. You've been able to get about 7 points, 4.5 boards out of Deshaun Harris-Smith, but he's been a disappointment. But for Maryland, they do a little bit of a better job of being able to take care of the ball. They do a nice job of being able to guard the arc as well. This Maryland team is a top 25 team in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Away from them, they go up against a Rutgers team that, while they are a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, away from home, they are giving up north of 19 points more per 100 possessions rather than when they are at home. And I do think that this is going to be a tough circumstance for Rutgers once again. Semi-total 126.5. Here at the 125, I think that this is close enough for late game falling. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Maryland. Did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. 687, 688 on the betting board. Penn State and Michigan do battle from the Target Center, and with Penn State, you're going to be getting them as a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 150.5. I set Penn State as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Michigan. I just keep thinking that the talent for Michigan is actually going to show through. You've got the top scorer on the fold for Penn State in Kanye Clary, but without him, they've actually been quite fine with their offense. They've gotten to at least 70 points in every single game in which he's been out of the fold, and for Penn Penn State, it's more or less the defense that is quite a bit of the concern. For Penn State, they are outside the top 300 in terms of rebound rate, with Kuda Swab give you 7.5 rebounds per game. Nobody else really gives you north of 4.5 boards, but for this Michigan team, you do have Terrace Reed down low. He's been able to do a solid job supplying the team with 7 rebounds per game, and they need him to be, because Olivier Kamwa, the transfer from Tennessee, he's out for the season after he was logging 15.7 boards per contest. And you got to teach me how to Dougie McDaniel. He's been able to shoot 38% from 3, 16.5 points per game, but for Michigan, you knew that the bread and butter of this team had to be their offense, and it's just fallen way downhill for this team. As for Michigan, this team has been able to exceed the 70-point plateau in now just one of their games since the beginning of the month of February. You've got a Penn State team that I think is going to really be giving it up in this spot, as they've been able to do a nice job generating turnovers. They're a top 20 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they are a really good three-point shooting defense as well, but with the way that they guard inside, they are very, very much a cream puff team there, with Puff Johnson only giving you about 3 rebounds per contest, but Ace Baldwin has been able to do a nice job in tandem with Nick Curran. Both of these guys were transfers over at VCU of taking on the scoring load of Clary. You've got Baldwin shooting 35% from 3, 2.5 steals, 14.5 points per contest, and Curran, he doesn't shoot it well from 3, but gives you about 9 points, 4 boards per contest. But I just think that because Penn State is so bad on the glass, and because Michigan is going to be able to take advantage, getting some good shots down low, that this is going to be a little bit of a tighter game than expected, and I just don't expect a lot of defense to be played here with two teams well outside the top 150. Turns out points a lot on a per possession basis, and Penn State playing a bunch of fair-bearing games. So setting my total at 154, looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points, with Michigan made them a 4-point dog, 689, 690 on the betting board. Quinnipiac and Canisius do battle from Atlantic City for the Metro Atlantic Tournament. Quinnipiac is a 6-point favorite with your total 144.5 to 145. I set Quinnipiac as a favorite of 8.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Canisius. I credit to them for being able to make it this far in the tournament, but for Canisius, it's been a really rough state of affairs for this offense. They have scored 73 points or fewer in all but 2 out of their last 12 games. They've got down low Frank Mitchell, who does a nice job with about 13.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game, and typically helps you be able to control the boards, but I don't think that he's going to be able to be as successful in this game going up against the Quinnipiac team as a top 85 team in terms of rebound rate, and just has really good balance in general. Amari Tice, coupled with Paul Otinho, have been able to give you about 12.5 rebounds per contest. Tice is able to give you 13 points per game, as he, along with Matt Bolanic, have been able to combine for 36.5% from 3. Bolanic has been able to give you 18.5 points per contest. It is a Quinnipiac team that they do turn the ball over a little bit over 12 times per contest, but Canisius, they turn the ball over closer to 13 times per game, and Quinnipiac much better at being able to generate turnovers. Quinnipiac, a top 55 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this Quinnipiac unit has outgotten to at least 71 points each of their last 5 games in games not played against Siena, because Siena is really bogging down games in general. They have been able to get past the 73-point plateau in pretty much all but one of their games since the beginning of the month of February. And for Quinnipiac, you've got a lot of guys that are able to contribute to this effort, including Savion Lewis, their main point guard, with 7.2 assists, shooting 40% from 3-point range. And this has been a Canisius unit that has been a little bit hot and cold in the way that they guard the 3-point arc, and it has been very, very cold for them recently. They rose up yesterday, but overall, Canisius, away from home, they allow opponents to shoot 36.5% from 3-point range. While you do have a Quinnipiac team that isn't too bad with regards to their perimeter defense, Quinnipiac, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they're about 210th in all of college basketball. That falls to 33% away from home. I do think that you get a little bit of a higher scoring game with Quinnipiac really bumping up their tempo now in the top 100 with regards to total possessions per game. So looking at the overset, my total 148.5, and willing to lay up to 8 with Quinnipiac. 691, 692 on the betting board. Iona and Fairfield do battle from Boardwalk Hall, and with Fairfield, they are a 2.5-point favorite. Total on this game is 150.5. I set my total at 143. I'm going to be taking a look at the under with Iona. This bunch just has not been able to put up offense ever since Greg Gecko-Gordon has been out of the fold. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis without him, it has fallen by darn near 5 points. It's an Iona team that has scored 71 points or fewer in, I believe now, every one of the games since he has been out. And you've got a Fairfield team that they have been very hot with their offense. They've gotten to at least 74 points in 4 of their last 5 games. You've got a Fairfield team that shoots it very well from 3-point range. Overall, they shoot 38% from the outside, and away from home, it's been able to travel as well. Bryson Gudine has been able to shoot 49% from 3. He's giving you 14.5 points per contest. Away from home, he shoots north of 45% from 3, and then Caleb Fields, along with Jaden Leach, have been able to combine for 32.5 points. Both shoot 39% plus from 3-point range, with Fairfield only turned the ball over 11 times per contest. It's a top 125 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and The key for them is taking care of the ball. Iona, a top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're also well outside the top 200 in terms of rebound rate. That's the main Achilles heel of Fairfield with Lewis Bleachmore. His 5.5 rebounds leading the way. That's not going to be unearthed in this game, as for Iona, they don't have a single guy on the roster right now that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game, with Gordon being out of the fold. Eden Trout, he's averaging about 14.5 points per contest, and he shoots about 36% from three-point range. This is a Fairfield unit that they're going to give it up a little bit from three-point range. Fairfield's opponent's three-point shooting percentage that is checking in right around about 155th in all of college basketball, and this is an Iona team that they themselves have been giving up quite a few open looks from three-point range this season, 219th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but Joel Brown has been able to give you double figures in pretty much 4 of the last 5 games. Gene Energruen, who has been able to shoot 40% from 3, has been able to supply 8.5 points per game as well, but I feel like we've gone too high with this total. Iona is a very mid-tempo team, and I do think that they just are going to look to bog down this game a little bit, generate some turnovers, but I don't think they're going to be successful with it. I said Fairfield is a 7-point favorite. I do not understand this 2.5 opener. We saw Iona yesterday struggle with Manhattan, so willing to lay with Fairfield, and I'm going to be looking at the under. Semi-total 143, 693, 694 on the betting board. Sam Houston State is going to be playing against Florida International. That's for the Conference USA quarterfinals out there in Huntsville, Alabama. Sam Houston State is a favorite of 8 points. Your total on this game, it is 150. Made Sam Houston State a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Florida International. They're just not going to be able to match up down low. Florida International, one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate, and it's a Florida International team that they just completely saw for turnovers. They're a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they literally have nothing else. They've got one guy trying to do a little bit of everything, as they've been able to get nearly 3.5 steals to go, along with 13 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists out of Ontario Dean. He leads the team in so many different categories. Javante Hopkins, he's been able to give you about 13 points per contest, shooting 37.5% from 3, but for FIU, they themselves turn the ball over about 14 times per contest, and with them being one of the worst rebounding teams in all of college basketball, you have to make do with it, with being able to lock down from 3-point, and they don't do that. They're a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, going against the Sam Houston State team that they're not the monsters with their 3-point shooting, but I mean, they shoot as a collective 35.5% from 3-point range. Their top 5 scorers, all but one of them, shoot north of 35% from the outside. Devin Barnes, Lamar Wilkerson, they combine to be able to give you 27.5 points per contest. You've got a Sam Houston State team that's not dominant with regards to rebounding, but you've got 3 different guys that give you at least 5 rebounds per game. Sam Houston State, a top 125 team in terms of their rebound rate now. What I will say is that Sam Houston State is probably going to fall victim to quite a few turnovers in this game. Florida International does generate those turnovers, and Sam Houston State, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they are outside the top 225, but I just need to see a little bit more of this Florida International team. They just don't have anything down low for Florida International. Last time they played against Sam Houston, it also allowed Sam Houston to shoot 9 of 18 from 3-point range. They themselves went 7-32, and even though Sam Houston State was out turnovered 13-14. They won the rebound battle by darn near 20, and that's why they were able to land base them. I think that it's going to be very clearly the same thing here. So I did something total 147.5. Both times these two teams played, it was a relatively low-scoring slog, and you do have a Sam Houston State team that has allowed 66 points or fewer for their last 5 games. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with Sam Houston State. 695, 696 on the betting board. Louisiana Tech and Middle Tennessee do battle, and Middle Tennessee is a underdog of 10 to 11 points. Total between 132 and 132.5. Did set my total 132, so you're at the 132.5. I'm going to be looking at this total under. Middle Tennessee has been outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis all season, but they've been able to get a little bit more going on offense. At least 68 points in 4 of their last 5 games, and the last time these two teams played, just mere days ago, that was an 84-70 win for Louisiana Tech. A day where both teams just decided to play very up-tempo, and I just don't think that that's going to be duplicating itself. Louisiana Tech is a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Louisiana Tech is not a team that really gets out of sorts in terms of their tempo. Louisiana Tech, in terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in 238th in all of college basketball. Middle Tennessee has really never been too much of an up-tempo team as well. Middle Tennessee, you're able to find them in terms of total possessions per game, more in that neighborhood, about 241st, and when it comes to Middle Tennessee, you just have a lack of shooting in general for the team. Then you've got Middle Tennessee as a collective shooting 31% from 3 with 14 turnovers per contest. Elias King, Javon Porter, these two guys have been able to combine for 26.5 points per contest, with Justin Porter being able to shoot about 33% from 3-point range. And I do like the versatility of Jerry Coleman Jones. He stands right around about 6'8", shoots 46% from 3, 11 points per contest, but he's the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 7.5 rebounds per game. They go up against the Louisiana Tech team as a top 35 team in terms of of their rebound rate with Daniel Bacho, 15 points, 10 boards, 2.5 blocks out of him. And for Louisiana Tech, their top two scorers outside of Bacho both shoot north of 40% from three-point range, going up against a Middle Tennessee team that they're not terrible with their three-point shooting defense, but far from amazing, especially on the road where they give up 37.5% three-point shooting to their opponents. So I did set my line at 12. It's a circumstance where here at the 132.5, looking at the under of Louisiana Tech, willing to lay it. I'd be willing to lay up to 11.5 with them. 697, 698 on the betting board. It is Arkansas versus Vanderbilt out there in Nashville, Tennessee for the SEC tournament, and with Arkansas, they are a favorite of 5.5 to 6 points. So on this game between 148.5 and 149, and with Arkansas, I made them a 6.5 point favorite. Opener was 6.5, so now that this number has come down, I'm going to be willing to lay it. Vanderbilt is in their home city. They're really not going to have too much of a home court advantage. I actually used to work out in Nashville, Tennessee for a year coming out of college, so I can tell you that this home court advantage is not necessarily a supreme one for a Vanderbilt team that's 349th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, outside the top 250 in terms of rebound rate, points scored, and points allowed on a per possession basis. The one thing that they've been able to do is take care of the ball. Ezra Magnon has been able to do a solid job with that regard. 14 points. He throws in there about 3.5 assists. Is not, though, a great three-point shooter as Vanderbilt as a whole. They shoot less than 32% from three, and for Arkansas, the talent is there. It's just been a problem of having these misfit pieces just being able to fit together. Tremont Mark, K-Leaf Battle, they've done a solid job being able to combine for about 31.5 points per contest. They just haven't had a main facilitator. Nobody on the team gives you north of 2.2 assists per game for an Arkansas team that they just have taken a bunch of bad shots as well. They're shooting 31.5% from three outside of Battle and Mark. Nobody else on the roster really shoots above 33% from three-point range. That really gives you significant scoring. Chandler Lawson has been able to shoot north of 35% from three, but he only throws in there about 3.8 points per contest. Trevon Brazil is a lone guy in the roster as well. That gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Arkansas outside the top 175 with regards to rebound rate. Still better than what you've got for this Vanderbilt team. Van Allen Lubin has been able to give you 6 boards, 12 points per contest, but I do think that in the end, even though it's been disappointing and sad for Arkansas, and they lost the last time they played against Vanderbilt. Last time these two teams faced off 85-82. Vanderbilt punked them on a night where Arkansas went just 10 of 30 from 3 points. I do think that they're going to be able to clean some things up, win the battle on the glass, and take this one out there in Nashville. I did set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. Made my total 146.5. Here at the 148.5, I'm going to be looking at the under. I think both teams should struggle to jump shots in general. 699, 700 on the betting board. It is Georgia. They play against Missouri. Missouri is a underdog of 3 to 3.5 points. On this game is 147. Missouri did not win a single game during the SEC regular season. There's no reason to think otherwise here. I set my line at a 5 with Georgia. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Georgia. This is a unit that has had their deficiencies as well, but I do like what Jabri Abdul-Rahim along with Thomason bring to the table, a combined 25 points per game, and they combine to shoot about 35% from 3 points. It's a Georgia unit that has been rough on the glass. Russell Tabor, he's able to give you about 7 rebounds per game, so this Georgia team, they're well outside the top 175 in terms of their rebound rate, but Missouri has absolutely nothing down low as well. You would have thought that Connor Vanover, giant of the earth at 7'3", would have been able to help things out, but he just hasn't been able to see a lot of playing time. Missouri is 348th in the country in terms of rebound rate, so while Georgia's bad, boy is that terrible for Missouri. They've been able to generate some turnovers, and your top 2 guys in Sean East, Tamar Bates, they combine to shoot well above 40% from 3 while being able to supply 31.5 points per contest, but it's been a Missouri team that's just been all sorts of inconsistent, and they just don't have a lot of depth as well. You've got Noah Carter, Nick Honor that both give you 11 points per contest, and for this Missouri team, if they can find a way to the free throw line, each of their top 4 scorers shoot at least 79.8% of the free throw line. They as a collective shoot 79% at the charity stripe, but they just don't have the depth that they were looking for. Caleb Grill, John Tonje being out of the fold, that really hurt them. They were hoping for Jesus Calavero to be able to give you a bit more. He has not done anything whatsoever, and with Missouri just getting completely bullied on the glass and them having given up at least 80 points in each of their last 5 games, I do think that this is going to be a game that turns ugly, even though Georgia has lost 4 of their last 5 as well. The defense has been respectable. They played like a 1-point game on the road against LSU, so they've been in better form. Circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at this total under, as I just don't think that Missouri necessarily does their part with this total, as Georgia, they've been able to lock down a little bit more with their defense, even though they are outside the top 125 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. I just don't think that Missouri is going to be able to give you anything down low. I think that there's going to be some sloppiness in this game, so I'm looking at the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 4.5 with Georgia. 701, 702. It's the WAC tournament out here in Las Vegas. Cal Baptist and Utah Valley do battle. Utah Valley is a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. Your total on this game is 128, and say Utah Valley is a 3-point favorite. Here at the 3.5 to 4, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Cal Baptist has had things go very much awry ever since Dominique Daniels has been out full due to injury, but got a Utah Valley team that they just simply can't shoot. They're in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of 3-point shooting percentage away from them. You've been able to get some relatively good production of Caleb Sloan-Carroll along with Drake Allen. They both combined for about 33.5 points per contest. Sloan-Carroll shoots 34% from 3, but one guy's that made at least 2 threes this year. He's the only guy in the roster shooting north of 30.5% from distance. You've got down low Trayvon Doris, who's able to give you 7.5 boards, 1.8 blocks per game, but even though he's been able to do a nice job down low, this team is outside the top 150 with regards to their rebound rate. Meanwhile, Cal Baptist is a top 80 team with regards to their rebound rate. Yvonne Odriogo, coupled with Hunter Goodrick, have been able to combine for 17 rebounds per game. You've been able to have Odriogo give you about 10 points per game. He's not a versatile guy, and for this Cal Baptist team, they are shooting just 32.5% for 3. It's a low-tempo team, 12 turnovers per contest. I'd like to see that be a little bit cleaner. And Blando Chiqueno, he was a really good scorer while he was over at New Hampshire a few seasons ago. He's giving you 12 points per game, but he's only shooting 27% from distance. That has been quite ghastly, and a big reason why Cal Baptist is right now 247th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but Utah Valley, they're 314th, and it's not like this Utah Valley team is playing good enough defense to really make do for it. Utah Valley, they do allow opponents to shoot only about 31.3% from 3-point range away from home themselves, so they've been able to do a relatively solid job on that front, but I do think the Cal Baptist, a team that is more around 168th in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, they're going to do a nice job being able to be up and be able to hold in this game, one that I think is going to be quite a bit of a slog. I did set my total at 131. I think that this is going to be close enough for late game felling, and I do think that with the deficiencies that you've got in terms of this Cal Baptist team overall, that is going to allow Utah Valley to be able to win the game outright and be able to score some points, as you do have Utah Valley, by the way, who scored at least 70 points in all 3 of their last 5 games, but I do think that with this spot, we've run a little bit too far on this Utah Valley line. We'll take the 4 with Cal Baptist and the over. 703, 704 on the betting board. Abilene Christian is going to be playing against Stephen F. Austin. Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, a 3 to 3.5 point favorite, totals between 138 and 139. I did set my total at 144. I'm looking at the over. Stephen F. Austin continues to be a top 60 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they're running into a buzzsaw of an Abilene Christian team that has now won 4 out of their last 5 games, and they've been able to do a nice job generating offense. They've been able to get to at least 75 points in 3 of their last 5 games, going against the Stephen F. Austin team that they've been a little bit up and down in terms of their defense, giving up north of 70 in 3 of their last 5 games. Stephen F. Austin, actually, a top 60 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 75 team in terms of rebound rate, and that's going to be to the detriment of Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate, but both of these teams hang their head on being able to generate turnovers, and it's an Abilene Christian team that does a relatively solid job of being able to guard the 3-point line. Meanwhile, Stephen F. Austin, they leave a lot to be desired there. Abilene Christian 123rd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a stone cold Stephen F. Austin team that they are allowing opponents to shoot from 3-point range in that neighborhood of about 36.4% from the outside. That is 328th in all of college basketball. With Abilene Christian, you've also got Ali Abdu-Debo, who's going to be the top scorer in this game, 15.5 points per contest. Arion Simmons giving you about 6.5 boards. He's been able to give you a little bit of versatility, has been nice, while Hunter Jack Ben shooting north of 40% from the outside is big as well. Going against the Stephen F. Austin team that has been without number 2 scorer Day-Day Hall for much of the season, giving you about 10.5 points per contest. Now, Latrell Jossel, he does shoot 35.5% from 3, 12.5 points per game, but Stephen F. Austin, one of the reasons why they were so successful last year was that they shot it well from 3. This year, just 32.7% from 3, and even though you've got a lot of guys that are able to chip in there about 7 to 8 points per contest, as a matter of fact, I believe that you've got 5 healthy guys that give you somewhere between 7 to 9 points per contest. I do think that Abilene Christian going to be able to do a relatively solid job here of holding in this game. I do think that in the end, just because Stephen F. Austin dominates the glass, they do get the job done, but I do think that this is going to be a bit of a higher scoring game with just the amount of possessions you get. Set by total 144, looking at the over, and since Stephen F. Austin has a 2-point favorite, so won't take 3+ here with Abilene Christian. 705, 706 on the betting board. 7:05, 7:06 on the betting board. Meet for the Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners. They play against UC Riverside at the Dollar Loan Center out here in Henderson, Nevada. They've listed at Las Vegas. I can tell you it's Henderson, but that said, UC Riverside, a 2 to 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 131.5 and 132.5. And with Riverside, I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the deuce with them. For Bakersfield, this team just really doesn't have a lot of scoring outside their main man, as you've been able to have Caleb Higgins chip in there 17.3 points per game, and nobody else on the roster. Gives you north of 8.5 points per contest. You've got nobody else there you're able to look to. You've been able to get about 8.5 points per contest out of Marvin McGee, but you're really grasping at straws there for a Bakersfield team that's well outside the top 230 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They turn the ball over 12 times per contest as a low-tempo team, and they don't have a ton of rebounding either. Modestus Concledes, the gentleman that comes in for Crane, he's been able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Lone guy of the roster. That gives you north of 4 boards per contest, and it's a UC Riverside team that they have been pretty ugly with their defense. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they've only got one guy on the roster as well, Kyle Owens, that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, yet they are 151st in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Bakersfield clocking in more around about 188th, and I do think that with this UC Riverside team, you just have more weapons in general, and you've got better ball control. For UC Riverside, they're only turning the ball over 9.5 times per contest. You've got a pair of guys in Braden Hardress along with Isaiah Moses combining for 24.5 points per contest. Both of these guys only shoot about 32% from three-point range, and as a whole, UC Riverside, they're shooting 31.6% from the outside, but you've been able to get some relatively good production out of Brandon Greschetti, who's been able to give you 8 points, 3.5 boards, has good versatility, shoots 38% from three-point range, even though it's been a Riverside team that's been rough with their just overall scoring. Them being able to take care of the ball a little bit better, going up against a Riverside team that they've had a tough time with that regard, and it's a Riverside team that, to their credit, the defense has really risen up. They have given up fewer than 60 points in 3 of their last 5 games, but much of that was against lesser competition. Going against a Riverside team that, out of nowhere, they've been able to get to at least 73 points each of their last 4 games, makes this a very interesting circumstance. I do think that we get something in the middle. Semi-total 132.5 here at the 131.5. Looking at the over, I also do think that Lincoln Felling can help you get this over, but with the Riverside, I do think that their advanced ball control and better rebounding wins out in this spot, willing to lay the deuce with them, and looking at the over. 707, 708 on the betting board. Seesaw, Cal State Northridge is going to be playing against UC Santa Barbara. Gauchos are a 3 to a 4-point favorite, and your total on this game between 149 to 149.5. I did set my total at a 151.5. I'm looking at the over. Now, it's a Santa Barbara team that away from home is actually giving up more than 10 points fewer per 100 possessions at home. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, but they've got some of the most dramatic home and road splits I've ever seen in my life. If you look at the Santa Barbara team, when they're in a road/neutral court environment, they're a top 40 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Actually oversold it, more like 9.3 points fewer per 100 possessions, but that's still absolutely wild. But you go up against a CSUN team that has been able to do a relatively solid job of doing the little things as well. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're a top 75 team in all of college basketball, and then you're able to throw in there the fact that this team is a top 75 team with regards to rebound rate. And they do go up against the Santa Barbara team. For as bad as it has been, they've actually been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. You've been able to have quite a few guys be able to step up, like Ariel Bland be able to give you 6 rebounds per contest. Yuan Traore gives you 15 points, 5 boards, and AJ Mitchell is the most dominant player in this game. 19.5 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, shoots 39% from 3-point range. But Sean Alanikins, Deontay Bostic for the CSUN team, they combine for about 34 points per contest. Both shoot about 35.5% from 3. For a bunch that they only shoot about 30.7% from the outside, and it is a UC Santa Barbara team that, with regards to their 3-point shooting defense, that's been a little bit of cause for concern for them when they've been at home. They go from giving up 38% 3-point shooting at home to 25.5% away from them. I do think that is iron out a little bit. I recognize that teams can have dramatic home and road splits, but that's just absolutely wild. Meanwhile, you've got a CSUN team that they've been giving up a few threes as well, but overall they've been able to do a relatively solid job holding down the fort and holding it down there. As for the Cal State Northridge team, they allow opponents to shoot 33.5% from the outside away from home. It is a Santa Barbara team that they do turn the ball over about 12 times per contest as well, while CSUN, they turn the ball over 14 times per game, but they're also a very up-tempo, rapid team. It is a CSUN team that has failed to get past the 70-point plateau in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, it's a Santa Barbara team that's now given up at least 74 in each of their last 5 games. So, good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my line at a 3.5 with Santa Barbara being the favorite. So, now that we've gotten to 4, that's my buy point on CSUN. And I did set my total 151.5. I do think that you get a higher scoring game. I do think that CSUN busts through with their offense against a Santa Barbara team that it just feels like they've gotten worse as the season has went along. So, we'll take the points with Northridge, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total over. And this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. This is a Big Sky final out there in Boise. 709, 710 on the betting board. Montana State do battle with Montana State. They open up at an offshore book as a 7-point favorite. At DraftKings, a 4.5. Totals between 146 and 148. I set my line at 5. Between these two, I would rather take 7 rather than lay 4.5. So that's where I stand there. Personally, I think that this is probably going to iron out. If we get a number of like 6 or something like that, I'd be willing to take those points with Montana State. With Montana State, they've gotten really hot with their 3-point shooting, and this is an interstate rivalry. I do think that accounts for something here, and I did set my total 147. Between the 146 and the 148, personally, I would rather take the 148 under because you do have two teams that are not very up-tempo. Both of these teams outside the top 200 with regards to total possessions per game, and Montana, they're closer to 300th in the country with this regard. Now, it's a Montana team that's been able to fire on all cylinders with their offense. They're a top 45 team in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. That said, this is a case where they're playing on back-to-back days. They're going to be a little bit more tired, and the legs seem to go out on you a little bit faster than everything else. You've got Ada Moody giving you 17 points. She's 39% for 3, and of your top 4 scorers, they're going to be active in this game. Every one of them does shoot at least 38.5% from 3-point range. For a Montana team that they only turn the ball over about 10 times per contest, they go up against a Montana State team as a top 75 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis away from home. This turns into a top 45 mark, and last time these two teams played, Montana was able to punk Montana State at home 88-69. That was a game where Montana shot 13 of 30 from 3-point range, but I do think that Montana State going to be able to fare a little bit better in this ordeal. It's a Montana State team that they really do scuffle on the glass as well in terms of offensive rebound rate, percentage of misses that they're able to get for a second chance. They're in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball, but they are built for tough. Robert Ford III, 7.5 boards, 15.5 points, 3 assists, 3 steals, shoots 42% from 3-point range. He would be able to get quite a bit as well with the 14 points per game out of Brian Garaki, who's been able to give you a little bit of versatility. Shoots 36.5% from the outside, and while Montana has been a very good offensive team, the team leaves something to be desired on defense. While outside the top 225, turns points allowed on a per possession basis for Montana, 287th in the country in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, allowing opponents to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range. And as I do this show, we are seeing this total come down to more like a 147.5, which I would still be willing to take a look at the under on. And for Montana, they're now between a 5 to a 7-point favorite, setting my line at 5. I'm going to be willing to take anything north of 5 here with Montana State, and anything above a 147, take for me on the under. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-531, 306-532. Alcorn St and Alabama A&M do battle in the SWAC quarterfinals out there in Birmingham, Alabama. Alcorn St, a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite, totals between 139 and 140, and with Alcorn St, made them an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Alabama A&M has some of the worst depth in all of college basketball. Actually, they've got depth, but they just don't have top-line performances. You've got Dalen Smith, who's been able to give you about 13.5, 14 points per contest, and outside of him, nobody else has been able to average north of 10 points per contest, and for Dalen Smith, he's out of the fold, so that really hurts this team. They're looking to guys like Christian Tucker, Amari Peak, who are giving you 9 points per contest to be able to step up, and with Tucker, he gives you 4 assists, a steal and a half per contest. There's nobody to help him out in the backcourt, though. They shoot about 28.5% from 3. They're a bottom 20 team. There's turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, they go up against an Alcorn St unit that overall for the season, well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Defense has been a little bit better, though. In regulation, they've given up fewer than 68 points in 3 of their last 5 games. This offense has been electric, getting to at least 73 points in each of their last 5 games, and Jeremiah Kendall is going to be able to win the battle down low, 16 points, right around about 6.5 boards per contest. You've got an Alabama A&M team that just really doesn't have anyone that does a good job of being able to pound the glass for this team. As a result, you've got an Alabama A&M team that's 213th in the country with regards to rebound rate. Alcorn State has been a little bit touch and go with that regard, but they're about 107th in the country with that respect, where you want to hurt Alcorn State. They don't guard the 3 well, but don't have a lot of outside shooting with Alabama A&M. Meanwhile, Jeremiah Gambrell gives you 13 points, shoots 42% from 3 points for an Alcorn State team that He's only turned the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. Alcorn St not generating a lot of turnovers, but Alabama A&M, they just give it away all by themselves. And I do think that Alcorn St going to continue to be able to put up these nice shooting numbers. I did set my total as a result at a 144, so you're at the 140 looking at the over of the Alcorn St willing to lay it. Set them as an 8-point favorite. 3-6-5-33, 3-6-5-34. Grambling is going to be playing against Alabama State out there in Birmingham, as Grambling is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Totals between 128 to 128.5, and circumstance where I'm going to be willing to take Alabama State on the money line. I did set them as a 1.5 point favorite with this Alabama State team. They've been able to do a very solid job of just being able to defend their top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Grambling, even though they have been much better here in conference, they have been a top 3 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do still leave a little bit of something to be desired. More around 180th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And away from them, they do give up 17.3 points more per 100 possessions than when they are at home. It's a Grambling team that's relatively rough with their offense. You've been able to have Contavious Dozier along with Michael Morton be able to combine for about 24.5 points per contest. They both combine to shoot about 33% from 3-point range, but Grambling, they do turn the ball over about 13.5 times per contest, and for Alabama State, the overall shooting is awful. They are shooting 37% from the floor, but they do a better job of being able to keep things clean with about 11.5 turnovers per game, and then you got a takeover player in TJ Madlock. That is the son of Tony Madlock, the coach, 16 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, nearly 1.7 steals per contest. CJ Hines, really the lone guy in the roster that shoots about 32% for 3. He's been able to give you about 35.5% 3-point shooting, but they do go up against the Grambling unit that they're not quite the same rebounding team that they were a season ago with the Grambling team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They are about 243rd in all of college basketball, and you had an Alabama State team that has been able to do a relatively solid job of being able to lock it down from 3-point range. They allow opponents to shoot just 32.6% from the outside in a road/neutral court venue, and with Grambling just not having a lot of firepower on offense. This Grambling team, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 316th in all of college basketball. Recognized at Alabama State, not any better at 349th, but they've actually scored more per possession away from home. I think Alabama State finds a way to get the job done in what I think is going to be a slog, but I think that they've overvalued the slog a little bit too much. Both of these teams relatively mid-tempo teams. Set my total at a 131.5, looking at the over, and Alabama State outright on the money line, 3-6-5-35, 3-6-5-36. McNeese and Nichols do battle from the Legacy Center out there in Lake Charles, Louisiana. McNeese is anywhere between a 14.5 to an 18.5 point favorite. That goes to show you how much these books out there on the East Coast and these, shall we say, overseas books have a difference in opinion. Total as I do this is anywhere between 134 and 140. I set my line at a 13.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points regardless, and I did set my total at 141.5. So on both of these numbers, I'd be willing to take a look at the over as well. But with this McNeese team, they are a dominant team. They have been absolutely tremendous with Shahada Wells being able to get 18 points. She's in the high 30s for 3-point shot. McNeese has been very good at taking care of the ball. Top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. But I really like the way that this Nichols team is trending upward. They've got 2 guys that are going to allow them to hang in the game. Jamal West along Deontay Smith. They're combining for 28 points per contest. Smith is able to generate about 2 steals per contest. You've got a unit that has been giving it up from the interior from 3-point range. Nichols is actually a very good team. They're a top 80 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Down low, well outside the top 200, and Nichols has been getting a little bit lambasted on the glass with having West and Smith really be your lone 2 guys down low, but now they've got a nice number 3 scorer in Robert Brown III, who's been able to present himself with about 13 points, shooting about 41% from 3-point. They're going to have a tough time down low against a Big D team that's in the top 125 with regards to rebound rate. Christian Schulmate, he's been able to do a nice job supplying about 12 points, 9.5 rebounds per game, gives you a block and a half per contest. We've got a pair of guys that shoot it really well from 3-point range, DJ Turn It Up Richards, Jovan Garcia. They combine to shoot 45% from 3, with both giving you about 11.5 points per contest. But I do think that for Nichols, they're going to be able to do an okay job of being able to guard the 3-point line. And this is a Nichols team that comes in very hot with their offense. They've now gotten to at least 70 points in each of their last 3 games, and if you're looking at 68 plus points, they've gotten there in 5 out of their last 6. So I do think that this is going to be a higher scoring game, despite the fact that McNeese is a slow controlled team. McNeese has also been one of the more efficient offenses in all of college basketball as well, 80 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. So I did set my total 141.5. I like the over, and at anything of 14 plus, going to be willing to take those points with Nichols. 3-6-5-37, 3-6-5-38. Norfolk State is going to be playing as Coppin State. This is from Norfolk, Virginia, as Norfolk State is a 13 to a 13.5 point favorite. So this game is between 130 and 132. Just to clarify, this is not the true home court of Norfolk State, but this is in their city, and I did set them as a 14-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I sort of gave them like half court here, but for this Coppin State team, they just can't score. They're in the bottom three in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Justin Winston has been solid, 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 30% for three, but Coppin State is a low-tempo team that they turn the ball over 15.5 times per contest. They shoot 37.5% from the floor, 28.5% from three-point range. Now, what Coppin State does well is they're a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're not horrible on defense. They're about 218th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is a Norfolk State team that is starting to give up some points. Norfolk State, bottom 10 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game for Norfolk State in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're checking in just 201st. They are giving up about 12.5 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are home, and this is a Norfolk State team that, with regards to their opponent's three-point shooting percentage, it is a little bit rough on that front as well. They do allow opponents to shoot about 34.5% per three-point range away from home, but again, who on Coppin State is going to be able to knock down those threes? You've been able to have Greg Spurlock be able to give you about 8.5 points per contest, but that's about it. Meanwhile, for Norfolk State, you do have a do-it-all sort of guy in Jabari Thomas. He comes in from UNC Wilmington, 17.5 points, 4 assists, shoots 39% from three-point range. And for Norfolk State, out of your top 4 scores, 3 of them do shoot at least 36.5% from three-point range. It's a Norfolk State team that has really been able to get it going on the offensive side of things as well, and I do think that that is going to be able to take hold against the Coppin State team that they have done anything but that. Norfolk State in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 147th in all of college basketball, with them being a team that also does a nice job of being able to generate turnovers. I do think that this turns into a little bit of a sloppy game that Norfolk State pulls out. Set my total at a 130, so you're at the 132, looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 13.5 for Norfolk State, 306-539, 306-540. NC Central is going to be playing against Maryland Eastern Shore. Maryland Eastern Shore is a 9.5 point underdog with your total 134, and with Maryland Eastern Shore, I did set them as a 9.5 point underdog. We're going to be looking for a little bit of line movement here, as it's a NC Central team that has been able to do a really good job with their backcourt, and what we have seen with this move is that this was more of an opener of 10 to 10.5, and if we could get back to double figures, that would be my buy point on Maryland Eastern Shore, as they do have a guy down low in Troy, a Hupseed, that I think is going to be able to keep them relatively lively in this game. 13.5 points, 8.5 boards per contest for NC Central. You just don't have anyone other than Emmanuel Izabuner, who's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game. He comes in from the Big South. He's been able to give you about 5.5 boards per contest. This is for an NC Central team that, with regards to their rebound rate this far this season, they're about 244th, and for Maryland Eastern Shore, they really don't have much outside of Hupsey, but they've got a few guys in the backcourt that can contribute. You've been able to get about 9.5 to 10.5 points per contest out of Devin Ellis. He only shoots about 26% from three-point range, but that does go up to about 33% away from home. Both of these offenses have been very touch and go. You've got an NC Central team that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 163rd in the country, but that falls off by 13 points per 100 possessions when they do leave home. Meanwhile, for the Old Shore, this is a bunch that has been a bottom 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis all season, and as a matter of fact, they're down to about 360th, but they do generate about 7 steals per contest. They only shoot about 29.5% from three, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold up against an NC Central team that's very top-heavy, with having Fred Cleveland Jr., Po Boy King, Jadarius Harris combined for about 45 points per contest. They combined as a trio to shoot about 35% from three-point range, but they don't necessarily do a good job on defense in terms of the interior, and I do think that that's where Maryland Eastern Shore, a team that has been rough with their three-point shooting percentage, is going to be able to hold up. I did set my line at a 9.5, so 10 plus. Going to be willing to take the points with Maryland Eastern Shore if we can get down to a 9. Personally, I'd rather lay 9 than take 10, but at 10 or more, I'm going to be taking a look at the points, and did set my total at 135.5, so also a case where I'm going to be looking at this total over with the way that NC Central has been able to get things going from the outside, and we wrap things up with 306-541, 306-542. Lehigh is in a true road game against Colgate. Colgate for the Patriot League title, 6.5 to 7-point favorites, totals between 133.5 to 134. Did set my total 139. I'm looking at the over. Lehigh is by far the most up-tempo team out there in the Patriot League. They're a top 100 team with regards to total possessions per game. Colgate is well outside the top 250, and Colgate has been a tremendous defense. Top 75 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Top 50 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they themselves still a solid three-point shooting team. They're not as dominant as they have been in past years, but they shoot 36% from three-point range. If you're looking on the landscape of college basketball, they're checking in more around about 161st in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. In terms of that overall three-point shooting percentage, that's still a top 75 mark in all of college basketball, and it is a Colgate team that they shoot more like 37% 39% from three-point range when they're at home. They go up against a Lehigh team that's very top-heavy with their scoring. Tyler Whitney Sidney, along with Keith Higgins, they combine for about 28 points per contest, 7 boards. You've had Higgins shooting 33% from three-point range, but each of your top 5 scorers for this Lehigh team, they shoot below 33.5% from three-point range, and you just don't have a lot down low. Dom Pearlin has been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game, lone guy in the roster. He gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, Keegan Records on the flip side for Colgate, he's able to give you about 5.5 or so rebounds per game. It's not a Colgate team that's dominant on the glass, but they rank about 102nd in the country with regards to rebound rate. Lehigh about 223rd. I just don't understand why this is such a tight line, because this is a Lehigh team that they really don't do anything great, including guard the three-point line. This is a Lehigh bunch that allow opponents to shoot from three-point range 36.1%. That's 318th in all of college basketball. Set line at 9. I'm going to be willing to lay with Colgate. Set by total 139. So also looking at the over, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Big thanks to Rob Donaldson of the Rob's Best Bets show for joining me in the last segment. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @DNR_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, maybe it does not matter. So as per usual, please just send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
This country was built on a distinctly American work ethic, but today, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries, and with that, we sent away good jobs and diminished our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make a variety of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more. All made right here in the USA, from growing the cotton and adding the final touches. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs for seamsters, cutters, and factory workers in towns and cities across the United States. And it's about more than an income. Jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.